At 2:11 a.m., Adrian Romano's phone screamed to life with the one voice he never expected to hear again. His ex-wife, 8 months pregnant and alone. "Someone's at my door," Claire whispered, her terror slicing through 8 months of silence. The divorce was supposed to protect her. The distance was supposed to keep her safe. Instead, the war found her anyway. And now she was in labor with nowhere to run. Adrian had walked away from everything to save her life. Tonight, he'd discover that leaving her was the one mistake that put her in the crosshairs. If you're hooked, stay until the end to see how this story unfolds. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. The phone rang at exactly 2:11 a.m., slicing through the silence of Adrian Romano's penthouse like a blade through silk. He didn't recognize the number. Hadn't in months. Every contact tied to his old life had been systematically deleted, burned away like dead wood from a diseased tree. The legitimate businesses he'd kept, real estate holdings, investment portfolios, technology ventures, those ran through corporate lines and business managers. Personal calls didn't exist anymore. Personal connections were liabilities he couldn't afford. But something about the way the phone vibrated against the nightstand made his hand move before his brain could stop it. Some primal instinct that lived deeper than logic, older than strategy. He answered without speaking. "Adrian?" The voice was barely a whisper, but he would have known it in a crowded stadium, in the middle of a war zone, in the last seconds before death. "Clara." "I'm sorry, I didn't know who else to call." His entire body went rigid. 8 months. 8 months since he'd signed the divorce papers with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. 8 months since he'd walked out of the courthouse and directly into a meeting with the 5 families to negotiate the terms of his withdrawal from operational control. 8 months of telling himself it was the right choice, the only choice, the choice that would keep her breathing. "What's wrong?" Not a question, a demand. "I'm in labor." Her breath hitched, pain threading through the words. "It's early, 5 weeks early, and Adrian," her voice dropped even lower. "Someone's outside my door." The world telescoped down to a single point of absolute clarity. "Don't open it." He was already moving, pulling on pants with one hand while keeping the phone pressed to his ear. "Where are you exactly?" "My apartment, the one on Riverside. The one I didn't move after. I couldn't afford to." Fury detonated in his chest, white-hot and immediate. The apartment they'd shared. The location he'd personally insured was buried under 6 layers of shell companies and false names. The address that exactly 3 people in the entire world were supposed to know. Someone had talked. "Bathroom, now. Lock the door. Turn off the lights." He was pulling a shirt over his head, grabbing the keys to the Aston Martin he kept in the private garage. The one that wasn't registered to any name that connected to him. "Stay on the line with me." Another contraction. She gasped, and the sound sent ice water through his veins. "Breathe through it. Count to 10. I'm 7 minutes away." "They're knocking." Adrian's hand froze on the doorknob of his own apartment. "What are they saying?" "Nothing. Just knocking. Steady. Like they know I'm here. Like they're waiting for me to answer." Professional. Which meant this wasn't some random break-in, wasn't some coincidence. This was targeted, deliberate. And the only reason someone would target Clara Bennett, divorced, untraceable, supposedly disappeared into civilian obscurity, was if someone had connected her to him, or if someone knew about the baby. "I'm in the car. 6 minutes." He peeled out of the garage, the engine's roar swallowed by the empty pre-dawn streets. "Clara, I need you to listen very carefully. Is the fire escape window still broken?" "You mean the one that never latched right?" "Yes." "Good. When I tell you, you're going to climb out onto the fire escape. Can you do that?" "Adrian, I'm in active labor. Can you do it?" A pause. Then, with the steel he'd always loved in her, "Yes. That's my girl." The words slipped out before he could stop them, old endearments that had no place in the gulf of 8 months and a legal dissolution. 4 minutes. "They still knocking?" "No." Fear crystallized in her voice. It stopped. Worse. That was worse. Knocking meant they were testing. Silence meant they were preparing. Adrian's foot pressed the accelerator to the floor. The city blurred past in streaks of amber streetlights and dark windows. At this hour, Riverside was 15 minutes away through normal traffic patterns. He'd make it in 4. Talk to me about the contractions. How far apart? Maybe 6 minutes? 7? I wasn't timing them. I thought it was false labor until my water broke, and then I was calling the doctor, and then I heard the footsteps in the hallway. Her voice cracked. I shouldn't have called you. This was selfish. You have your life, I have mine. That was the whole point. Clara. He cut through her spiral with absolute authority. You did exactly right. The only thing that matters right now is getting you somewhere safe. Everything else is noise. Understood? Understood. A shaky exhale. God, this hurts. I know. You're strong enough. 3 minutes. He ran a red light, then another, the empty streets giving him clear passage. The divorce was to protect you from this exact scenario. Someone found out anyway, which means I have a leak to plug. But first I get you out. Adrian, what if they're not here for you? What if this is random? It's not. He took a corner at 60, tires screaming. How many people knew you were pregnant? My doctor, my sister. The landlord saw me last week. How many people knew the baby was mine? Silence. Clara, just my sister. I didn't tell anyone else. Everyone thinks you and I haven't spoken since the divorce. I've been using my maiden name at all the appointments, paying cash. 2 minutes. Then someone's been watching you. Someone patient enough to wait until you were vulnerable. His mind raced through the possibilities, shuffling through names and faces and grudges that should have died when he'd stepped back from operations. We'll figure out who after you're safe. Right now, I'm 1 minute out. Get to that bathroom window. He heard movement, her breathing harsh and labored, the creak of a door, the scrape of a window frame. It's a long drop, she said, and he could hear the fear. Fire escape is 2 feet down. You've done it before. I wasn't 9 months pregnant before. Fair point. Adrian screeched to a stop in the alley behind her building, already out of the car and moving toward the fire escape. The metal framework cast shadows like skeletal fingers against the brick. Above, he could see the faint glow of her bathroom window, partially open. I'm directly below you. 30 seconds. He took the stairs 3 at a time, boots silent on the metal grating despite his speed. Years of moving through the dark, through hostile territory, through buildings that held enemies behind every door, muscle memory that hadn't faded with his retirement. Clara's window was on the 4th floor. He reached it in 20 seconds. She was already halfway out, one leg through the opening, her body awkward with the weight of late pregnancy. Even in the dim light from the street below, he could see the fear painted across her face and the determination underneath it. I've got you. He reached up, hands closing around her waist. Just let go. I won't let you fall. For one suspended moment, their eyes met. 8 months of silence, 8 months of carefully maintained distance, 8 months of pretending they were strangers, all of it evaporated in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Then she let go, and he caught her. The weight was familiar and foreign all at once. He'd held her 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never swollen with their child, never shaking with pain and fear, never with the knowledge that someone was hunting her. Down! Quickly! He kept one arm around her as they descended, her breathing ragged against his shoulder. She stopped twice, contractions seizing her body with enough force that she had to grip the railing and breathe through the pain. Adrian, almost there, just a few more steps. They hit the alley just as he heard the unmistakable sound of splintering wood from above, her apartment door giving way to force. Clara heard it too. Her hand tightened on his arm. They're inside. And we're outside. Come on. He guided her to the Aston Martin, helped her into the passenger seat with as much care as the urgency allowed. She was breathing hard, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other white-knuckled on the doorframe. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't find you. He pulled out of the alley at speed, watching the mirrors for pursuit. Nothing yet. But they'd realize she was gone within minutes, and then the real chase would begin. Clara gasped, her body curling forward. Another contraction. Stronger. Adrian's jaw tightened. How long since the last one? Maybe 4 minutes. Not good. 4 minutes meant active labor, meant this baby was coming soon whether they were ready or not. He needed a secure location, needed a doctor he could trust, needed time they didn't have. He pulled out his secondary phone, the one that still had 3 numbers in it. Numbers he'd kept for exactly this kind of emergency, the kind he'd prayed would never come. First call. Marcus Chen, his former head of security, now running a private protection firm that asked no questions and kept no records. It's me. I need a clean location, medical staff, and a perimeter, 60 minutes or less. Marcus didn't hesitate. The warehouse on 5th and Brennan. I'll have a team there in 30. Make it 20. Done. Second call. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the only physician who'd ever treated his people without reporting to authorities. She'd retired 2 years ago, moved to a quiet practice in the suburbs, left the chaos behind. Sarah, it's Adrian Romano. I need you. A long pause. I'm out of that life. This isn't business, it's personal. He stopped, recalibrated. Clara's in labor, 5 weeks early, and we're being hunted. Another pause, shorter this time. Where? Warehouse on 5th and Brennan. Can you be there in 40 minutes? 30. I'll bring everything I need. She hung up. Adrian allowed himself one moment of relief before making the third call, the one he didn't want to make but had no choice about. Vincent Castellano, current head of the Romano operations, appointed when Adrian had stepped back. A man who'd sworn loyalty, who'd promised to maintain the peace Adrian had negotiated, who'd vowed that the retirement would stick. Adrian, it's the middle of the night. Someone's targeting Clara. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Then carefully, I thought the separation was supposed to prevent that. So did I, which means either someone didn't get the memo or someone's decided the rules don't apply anymore. Adrian took a corner smoothly, conscious of Clara's sharp intake of breath beside him. I need to know if this came from inside. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. My ex-wife is in labor and someone kicked down her door 20 minutes ago. You want to tell me that's a coincidence? Where are you taking her? Adrian's hand tightened on the wheel. Wrong answer. The right answer would have been immediate denial, immediate offer of resources, immediate promise to hunt down whoever was responsible. Asking for location first meant Vincent was calculating angles, weighing options. Meant Vincent might already know. Somewhere safe, I'll be in touch. Adrian, if you're back in play, people need to know I'm not back in play. I'm protecting my family. There's a difference. He ended the call and threw the phone out the window, watching it shatter against the pavement. Clara was watching him, her face pale in the dashboard lights. You think it's Vincent? I think someone talked. Whether it was Vincent or someone he trusted, that's what I need to find out. He reached over, found her hand, squeezed once. But that's for later. Right now you focus on breathing, on staying calm, on our daughter. You know it's a girl? He glanced at her, caught the small smile fighting through the pain. I might have had someone check the hospital records from your ultrasound, anonymously, just to know. That's incredibly invasive. That's incredibly true. He took another turn, the warehouse district coming into view. I'm sorry. For all of it. For leaving. For the distance. For not being there when... Stop. Her hand tightened on his. You left to keep me safe. It didn't work, but the intention was good. We can process the emotional fallout after we survive the next few hours. Practical. Even in labor, even terrified, she was practical. It was one of the things he'd loved most about her, the ability to compartmentalize, to prioritize, to face reality without flinching. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive structure of corrugated metal and reinforced concrete. Marcus's black SUV was already there, along with 2 others. Men in tactical gear were establishing a perimeter, checking sight lines, setting up portable lights. Adrian pulled into the loading bay, killed the engine. Can you walk? Can I? Clara laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Adrian, I just climbed out a 4th-story window and down a fire escape while having contractions. I can walk. Good point. Marcus appeared at the car door before Adrian could open it, his face professionally neutral. Sir, ma'am, we've got the 2nd floor set up. Doctors en route, ETA 10 minutes. Threats? Adrian helped Clara out of the car, supporting her weight as another contraction hit. Nothing immediate, but I've got movement on the street cameras near her apartment. 3 vehicles, coordinated arrival pattern. They're searching the building now. How long before they expand the search radius? If they're smart, 20 minutes. If they're thorough, 40. Adrian nodded, guiding Clara toward the interior stairs. The warehouse had been one of his legitimate holdings, a distribution center for imported electronics. Now it was empty, echoing, the perfect place to disappear for a few hours. The second floor had been converted into a makeshift medical suite, clean sheets on a reinforced table, portable monitors, medical supplies arranged with military precision. Marcus's team didn't do anything halfway. "This is insane," Clara breathed, looking around. "This is completely insane." "This is Tuesday." Adrian helped her onto the table, arranged pillows behind her back. "How are the contractions?" 3 minutes apart, getting stronger. She gripped his hand hard enough to hurt. "Adrian, I'm scared." He'd faced down armed rivals, survived 3 assassination attempts, negotiated treaties with people who wanted him dead. But seeing fear in Clara's eyes undid him faster than any weapon. "I know, but you're not alone. I'm here. I'm not leaving." He brushed hair back from her forehead, the gesture automatic and tender. "That's a promise." Dr. Mitchell arrived 9 minutes later, a compact woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and hands that moved with absolute confidence. She took one look at the setup, nodded approval at Marcus, and turned to Clara with a professional smile. "Let's see how we're doing." The examination was quick, thorough. Clara's breathing went sharp and shallow, pain and fear mixing in equal measure. Adrian stayed at her shoulder, his presence solid and unwavering. Dr. Mitchell looked up, her expression serious. "You're at 7 centimeters. This baby's coming soon, whether we're ready or not." "How soon?" Adrian asked. 2 hours, maybe 3 if we're lucky. "And if there are complications?" "Then we deal with them." But Clara's young, healthy, and strong. "The baby's heartbeat is good. We'll manage." She started prepping equipment, her movements economical. "The bigger question is whether this location is secure enough." As if on cue, Marcus's voice came through the radio on Adrian's belt. "Boss, we've got a problem." Adrian stepped away from the table, keeping his voice low. "Talk to me." Surveillance van just parked 2 blocks east. Professional setup, expensive equipment. They're scanning radio frequencies. "Can they find us?" "Not immediately, but if they're systematic, they'll eventually triangulate our location." Adrian looked back at Clara, at Dr. Mitchell preparing the delivery supplies, at the reality that his daughter was going to be born in the next few hours, whether or not they had hostile forces closing in. "Time until they get close enough to be a problem?" 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. The same time frame as the delivery. Of course it was. "Double the perimeter, rotating patrols. Anyone who gets within 3 blocks, I want to know about it." He paused, making a calculation he'd hoped never to make again. "And Marcus? Go loud if you have to. I don't care about subtlety anymore." "Understood." Adrian returned to Clara's side. She was breathing through another contraction, her face flushed with effort. When it passed, she looked at him with 2 clear eyes. "They're coming, aren't they?" "No point in lying." "Yes." "How long do we have?" "Enough?" He took her hand again, thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Focus on the baby. Let me handle the rest." "Adrian, Clara." He leaned down until their foreheads touched, until there was nothing in the world but the 2 of them, and the truth between them. "I walked away to protect you. I signed papers and burned bridges and dismantled everything I built because keeping you safe mattered more than any of it, and I'd do it again. But I will not let anyone hurt you or our daughter, whatever it takes, whatever it costs. Do you understand?" She nodded, tears slipping free. "I never wanted this for you. For us." "I know, but it found us anyway." He kissed her forehead, gentle and fierce all at once. "So now we deal with it, together." The next hour blurred into a cycle of contractions and breathing, pain and pressure, Clara's grip on his hand strong enough to bruise. Dr. Mitchell worked with calm efficiency, monitoring vitals, checking progression, offering steady reassurance. Outside, Marcus's team maintained the perimeter. Twice, vehicles approached too close. Twice, they were turned away, once by a carefully staged traffic accident, once by a utility crew that materialized out of nowhere to block the street. But the surveillance van didn't move, just sat there, 2 blocks away, watching and waiting. At the 90-minute mark, Marcus returned. His expression was grim. "We've got company, real company. 4 SUVs, approaching from different directions. Coordinated assault pattern." Adrian's blood went cold. ETA? 15 minutes. He looked at Dr. Mitchell. How close are we? She didn't look up from Clara. Transition phase could be 30 minutes, could be 3 hours. Babies come on their own schedule. We don't have hours. Then you'd better buy me time, because I'm not delivering this baby in a moving vehicle. Fair enough. Adrian leaned down, caught Clara's fevered gaze. I have to go handle something. I'll be right downstairs. You won't even know I'm gone. Don't you dare get shot? Her voice was ragged but fierce. Don't you dare leave me alone with this baby. Never. He kissed her knuckles. I'm coming back. That's a promise. Then he was moving, taking the stairs 3 at a time, Marcus at his shoulder. The first floor was dark, shadows cutting sharp angles across empty floor space. His team had taken positions at every entrance, every window, weapons ready but not visible. Options, Adrian said. We can hold them off for maybe 10 minutes if they come hard, longer if they're cautious, but eventually they'll breach. Adrian's mind raced through scenarios, tactics, outcomes. Who's leading the assault? Don't know yet. They're staying dark. A thought occurred, cold and certain. Get me a line to Vincent. Now. Marcus handed over a phone. Adrian dialed from memory, waited through 3 rings. Adrian, I told you, I need to know where... They're here. 4 teams, coordinated assault. This is your operation, Vincent? What? No, I told you, I don't know anything about... Then who does? Because someone gave them Claire's location. Someone told them exactly where to hit and when. And that someone either works for you or is working against you. A pause. There's been chatter about an outside group making moves. I thought we had it contained. Clearly not. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to find out who's leading this assault. You're going to call them off. Or I'm going to assume you're behind it, and I'm going to burn your entire organization to the ground. Adrian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Starting tonight. Starting now. That's a declaration of war. No, that's a promise. Claire's in labor upstairs. My daughter is about to be born, and I will kill anyone who threatens them, including you. Choose quickly. He ended the call, handed the phone back to Marcus. That bought us maybe 5 minutes of confusion. They'll have to verify with their chain of command. Use it. To do what? Find out who's really calling the shots. Marcus nodded, already moving to coordinate with his team. Adrian stayed in the shadows, watching the perimeter through night vision scopes. The SUVs were closer now, visible through the industrial park's sparse lighting. They'd stopped just outside the immediate kill zone, engines idling, waiting. His radio crackled. Movement, 2nd floor window, north side. Adrian's head snapped up. The 2nd floor, where Clara was. He took the stairs at a dead run, weapon drawn before he consciously decided to pull it. The hallway was clear, but the door to the makeshift delivery room stood open, when it should have been locked. He cleared the threshold in combat stance, gun raised, every nerve screaming danger, and stopped. Victor Salazar stood next to Clara's bed, hands raised in apparent surrender. His consigliere. His right hand for 15 years. The man he'd trusted with operational control when he stepped back. Dr. Mitchell was frozen mid-motion, a scalpel held defensively. Clara was propped against pillows, her face twisted with pain and fury. Adrian, Victor's voice was carefully neutral. I can explain. Start talking. You've got 30 seconds before I put a bullet in your skull. It wasn't supposed to go this way. The divorce was supposed to make her invisible. The separation was supposed to be clean. But then word got out about the pregnancy. Because you told someone. Because I had to negotiate with the Eastern families. They wanted insurance. Wanted to know you weren't coming back into play. I thought if I gave them information about Clara, about the baby, it would satisfy them. Adrian's world turned red at the edges. You used my family as a bargaining chip. I used information as leverage. There's a difference. They were never supposed to touch her. That was the deal. The information stayed theoretical, but then... Victor swallowed hard. Then someone else found out, someone outside the agreement, and they decided Clara was the perfect pressure point to bring you back into the fold. Who? The Volkov Syndicate. They've been pushing into territory trying to fill the vacuum you left. They think if they can force you to choose between Clara and peace, you'll come back swinging, create chaos, let them exploit the power shift. Adrian's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed to pull it, to end the threat, to eliminate the man who'd betrayed everything. But Clara's voice cut through the rage. Don't! He looked at her, She was breathing hard, sweat beading on her forehead, but her eyes were clear. Don't kill him. Not here. Not in front of our daughter. Clara, I mean it. Another contraction seized her, and she gritted her teeth against the pain. You want to deal with him? Fine, but not like this. Not while I'm watching. Dr. Mitchell moved then, positioning herself between Victor and the table. Everyone who's not essential to this delivery needs to leave. Now. Adrian looked at Victor, at the man who'd sold them out, at the trader who'd thought information was just another currency to trade. You're going to fix this. You're going to call the Volkov Syndicate and tell them to stand down, and then you're going to disappear, because if I see your face again, understood. Victor backed toward the door, hands still raised. For what it's worth, I never meant, I don't care what you meant. I care what you did. Get out. Victor left. Adrian locked the door behind him, then turned back to Clara. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as another contraction hit. That's it, Dr. Mitchell said, checking monitors. We're at full dilation. Time to push. Everything else fell away. The threats outside. The betrayal. The war brewing in the shadows. None of it mattered more than the woman on the table and the life about to enter the world. Adrian moved to Clara's side, took her hand. I'm here, right here. Don't let go. Never. The next 20 minutes were an eternity compressed into heartbeats. Clara pushed with everything she had, her screams echoing off warehouse walls. Dr. Mitchell called instructions, calm and focused. Adrian stayed locked in place, his hand going numb from Clara's grip, his entire world reduced to helping her breathe, helping her focus, helping her bring their daughter into the light. Then, one more push, one more, and we're there. Clara bore down with a sound that was half agony, half triumph. And suddenly, there was movement, there was life, there was silence. Terrible, deafening silence. Dr. Mitchell moved quickly, clearing airways, checking vitals. Adrian's heart stopped in his chest, the world tilting sideways. No, not after everything, not now. A small, furious cry split the air, the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. She's perfect, Dr. Mitchell said, smiling for the first time all night. Absolutely perfect. She placed the baby on Clara's chest, a tiny red-faced creature with a shock of dark hair and lungs that clearly worked just fine. Clara was sobbing, laughing, her hands cradling their daughter with infinite gentleness. Adrian couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only stare at the miracle in front of him, at the life they'd created, at the future that suddenly existed in sharp, brilliant focus. Say hello to your daughter, Clara whispered. He reached out with one shaking hand, touched the baby's impossibly small fingers. She gripped his thumb with surprising strength, her eyes squeezed shut, her mouth working soundlessly. Hello, Elena, he said, his voice breaking on the name. I'm your father, and I promise you. He looked at Clara, at the woman he'd never stopped loving, at the family he'd tried to protect by leaving. I promise both of you. This ends tonight. Clara met his eyes, understanding passing between them without words. How? By making them more afraid of what I'll do if they don't back down than what I might do if they push forward. He kissed Elena's forehead, then Clara's. Stay here. Stay safe. I'll be back before you know I'm gone. Adrian! But he was already moving, already shifting into the cold, calculated mindset that had kept him alive through 100 conflicts. He found Marcus at the perimeter, watching the SUVs that still hadn't moved. They're waiting for orders, Marcus said. Victor came out 10 minutes ago, made some calls. Now nothing. Good. Get me a line to the Volkov leadership, whoever's running this operation. Boss, if you negotiate... I'm not negotiating. Adrian's voice was ice and iron. I'm dictating terms. The call connected after 3 rings. A voice Adrian didn't recognize. Heavy accent, amused tone. Mr. Romano, we were wondering when you'd reach out. You have 30 seconds to pull your teams back and leave the city. After that, I start making examples. Laughter. You retired. You walked away. You don't have the organization to make threats anymore. I don't need an organization. I need 3 phone calls. Adrian pulled out his personal phone, the one with the numbers he'd never deleted. First call goes to the FBI field office. I give them everything I know about your operations, every shipping route, every corrupt official, every piece of evidence I collected over 15 years. Your entire infrastructure gets burned to the ground. Silence on the other end. Second call goes to the Castellano family. I tell them you've been using information from Victor to make plays against their interests. You get a war you can't win. And the third call? The voice was tighter now, less amused. The third call goes to every asset I still have buried in your organization. Sleeper agents you don't know about. People I placed years ago for exactly this kind of situation. And I activate all of them at once. A long pause. You're bluffing. Am I? Adrian smiled without humor. You came after my family, my ex-wife, my newborn daughter. You think I won't burn the entire world down to protect them? Another pause, longer this time. The sound of muffled conversation in the background. Then, what do you want? You leave, tonight. You don't come back. You spread the word that Clara Bennett and Elena Romano are untouchable. Anyone who violates that gets the full weight of everything I built dropped on their head. And in exchange? In exchange, I stay retired. I don't come back into play. I don't rebuild my empire. I let the existing power structure stand. Adrian watched the SUVs through the scope, counting men, calculating odds. But if anyone, and I mean anyone, threatens my family again, all bets are off. And I promise you the chaos I'll create will make the last 20 years look like a practice run. The longest pause yet. Then finally, agreed. But Romano, this is the last pass you get. Next time someone comes for your people, you're on your own. There won't be a next time. Adrian ended the call, watched through the scope as the SUVs started their engines. One by one, they pulled away, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus appeared at his shoulder. They're really leaving. They're really leaving. Adrian lowered the scope, suddenly exhausted. Get me back upstairs. Clara was sitting up when he returned, Elena cradled against her chest, both of them clean and peaceful. Doctor. Mitchell was packing up equipment, satisfied smile on her face. All clear? Clara asked. All clear. Adrian sank into the chair beside the bed, every muscle in his body suddenly remembering how to feel tired. They're gone. They won't be back. And Victor? Gone too. I'll deal with him later. Right now. He looked at Elena, at the tiny miracle sleeping peacefully against her mother's heartbeat. Right now, this is all that matters. Clara shifted, making room on the narrow bed. Come here. He stretched out beside her, careful not to jostle them. Clara leaned against his shoulder, Elena between them, and for the first time in 8 months, Adrian felt something like peace settle over him. We can't go back to the way things were, Clara said quietly. I know. And we can't pretend the danger doesn't exist. I know that too. So what do we do? Adrian looked down at his daughter, at her perfect small face, at the future sleeping in his arms. We build something different, something that doesn't require me to choose between family and safety, something that protects all of us. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. He kissed Clara's temple, then Elena's head. We'll figure it out together. Outside, dawn was breaking over the warehouse district, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Inside, a family existed that hadn't been there yesterday, fragile and fierce and fighting for survival. Adrian Romano had walked away from power once to protect the woman he loved. Now, holding his daughter for the first time, he understood that walking away had never been enough. The real work, the hard work, was just beginning. The safe house Marcus arranged was nothing like the warehouse. It sat in the hills outside the city, a modern structure of glass and stone that looked more like an architect's showcase than a fortress. But Adrian knew better. The windows were bulletproof. The walls were reinforced concrete beneath the aesthetic facade. And the security system could detect a mouse at 300 yards. Clara hadn't said much during the drive. She'd sat in the back of the armored SUV with Elena strapped to her chest in a carrier Dr. Mitchell had somehow produced, her eyes tracking every car that passed, every shadow that moved wrong. The exhaustion of labor had settled into her bones, but the fear kept her alert, kept both of them alert. It's temporary, Adrian said as Marcus's team swept the interior one final time. Just until I can restructure things, make it permanent. Clara looked at him over Elena's sleeping head. How do you make hunted permanent safe? By eliminating the hunters. He said it like he was discussing the weather, calm and factual. But Clara knew him well enough to hear the steel underneath. The house had been stocked with everything they needed. Infant supplies in the nursery. Clara's preferred coffee in the kitchen. Her clothes in the master bedroom closet, the right sizes, the right styles, as if someone had studied her shopping patterns and replicated them exactly. She stopped in the doorway of the bedroom, staring at the familiar fabrics hanging in neat rows. How long have you been planning this? Since the day I signed the divorce papers. Adrian appeared behind her, close enough that she could feel his presence but not touching. I hoped I'd never need it, but I wasn't going to risk being unprepared if something went wrong. Something did go wrong. Yes. He moved past her, checking the window locks with practiced efficiency. Victor's already in federal custody. I made one of those 3 phone calls I mentioned. The FBI has enough evidence to put him away for the rest of his life. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle Elena. You kept evidence? After you retired? I kept insurance. There's a difference. Adrian turned from the window, his face shadowed. Every major player, every significant operation, every piece of leverage I might need, I documented it, encrypted it, stored it in locations even Marcus doesn't know about. That's dangerous. That's survival. He crossed to them, crouched down so he was eye level with Clara. I walked away from operations, but I never stopped being strategic. And the first rule of strategy is never leave yourself completely vulnerable. Elena stirred against Clara's chest, making small sounds that weren't quite crying but suggested it was coming. Clara stood, swaying automatically to settle her. She needs to eat, and I need to figure out how to do this without dropping her. Dr. Mitchell left instructions and a number to call if you need help. Adrian's expression shifted, something almost uncertain crossing his features. I can give you privacy if you want. Clara looked at him, at the man who'd orchestrated her escape from armed mercenaries, who'd held her hand through labor, who'd threatened to burn down criminal empires to protect their daughter. The man who'd been her husband, then her ex-husband, and now existed in some undefined space between. Stay, she said. I don't want to be alone. So he stayed, sat in the chair by the window while Clara settled into the bed's padded headboard and carefully, awkwardly, helped Elena latch. It hurt more than she expected, and the vulnerability of it, feeding their daughter while Adrian watched, made something twist in her chest. You're doing great, he said quietly. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. The words were almost exactly what he'd said in the warehouse. Clara wondered if he realized it, wondered if the repetition was intentional or just the truth surfacing in different moments. Elena ate with single-minded determination, her tiny hands flexing against Clara's skin. Outside, the sun was fully up now, morning light spilling gold across the hills. From here, the city looked peaceful, distant, like the violence of the last 12 hours had happened in a different universe. What happens now? Clara asked. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I meet with the remaining family heads, renegotiate the terms of my retirement, make it clear that certain lines can't be crossed. And if they don't agree, they'll agree. No doubt in his voice, just certainty. Because I'm offering them something they want more than conflict. What? Stability. The chaos of the last 8 months, the power struggles, the territorial disputes, the Volkov syndicate pushing in, all of it stems from the vacuum I left. They want structure back, order. I'm going to give it to them, just not the way I did before. Clara shifted Elena to her shoulder, patting her back gently. You're going back. No. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm creating something different, a framework that doesn't require my active participation, but uses my reputation as leverage. A set of rules with real consequences. A system that protects itself. That's impossible. That's necessary. He held her gaze. I can't keep you safe by hiding anymore. Victor proved that. The only way to protect you and Elena is to make it more costly to threaten you than to leave you alone. That sounds like war. That sounds like deterrence. Adrian stood, moved to the window again, restless energy that had nowhere to go. I spent 15 years building an empire through fear and force. Maybe it's time to try building something through consequence and accountability instead. Clara watched him, this man she'd married and divorced and still loved, despite every logical reason not to. You really think you can change how this world works? I think I can change how I work in it. He turned back to her. And I think I have to try. For Elena. For you. For any kind of future that doesn't involve running and hiding and waiting for the next threat. Elena had fallen asleep again, milk-drunk and peaceful. Clara laid her carefully in the bassinet that had been set up beside the bed, tucking the blanket around her small form. How long do we have before you need to go? Few hours. The meeting's at noon. That's not much time. It's enough. Adrian crossed back to the bed, sat on the edge beside Clara. I need you to promise me something. What? If this goes wrong, if I don't come back from this meeting, Marcus has instructions. He'll get you and Elena out of the country. New identities, new lives, resources to disappear completely. You'll be safe. Clara's blood went cold. Adrian, promise me. His hand found hers gripped tight. Promise you won't try to save me or wait for me. Just take Elena and run. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that wasn't acceptable, wasn't an option she could live with. But she'd married a man who lived in calculated risks and contingency plans. And she'd learned long ago that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was give someone the peace of knowing their worst-case scenario had a solution. I promise. The words tasted like ash. But you better come back. I will. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. I have too much to lose now. They spent the next 2 hours in careful domesticity. Adrian showed Clara how the security system worked, how to activate the panic room hidden behind the master closet, how to contact Marcus if something went wrong. Clara tried to memorize it all while fighting the exhaustion that kept pulling at her edges. Elena woke crying at 10, and Clara changed her first diaper with hands that shook from nervousness. Adrian talked her through it, his voice steady and calm, even though he'd probably never changed a diaper in his life. They were both making it up as they went, pretending competence they didn't feel. She's so small, Clara whispered, staring down at Elena's scrunched face. How is something this small supposed to survive in a world like ours? Because she has us. Adrian's hand settled on Clara's shoulder, warm and solid. And we're not going to let anything hurt her. At 11:30, Adrian changed into a different kind of armor. Tailored suit, dark and expensive. The kind of clothing that announced power without saying a word. He checked his appearance in the mirror with the same precision he'd checked the window locks, making sure every detail was perfect. Clara watched from the bed, Elena sleeping against her chest again. You look like you're going to war. I am, just a different kind. He turned from the mirror, crossed to them, bent down and kissed Elena's forehead with infinite gentleness, then Clara's. I'll call when it's done. Adrian? She caught his hand before he could pull away. I love you. I never stopped, even when I signed those papers. His eyes closed, something like pain flickering across his features. I never stopped either. That's why I left. I know. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Now come back to us. He left without another word. Clara listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of the door closing, the SUV engine starting and fading into distance. Then she was alone with Elena, and the silence and the fear that pressed against her chest like a physical weight. The house had monitors in every room, screens that showed different angles of the property. Clara found herself watching them obsessively, tracking the security team's patrols, checking for movement that shouldn't be there. It was exhausting and necessary and did nothing to quiet the anxiety. Elena woke crying at 12:15. Clara fed her again, changed her again, walked circles around the bedroom while humming songs she half remembered from childhood. The domestic routine helped, gave her something to focus on besides imagining all the ways Adrian's meeting could go catastrophically wrong. Her phone rang at 1:30. Unknown number. Clara's heart seized, every terrible possibility flooding through her mind at once. Hello? Mrs. Romano? A woman's voice, professional and cool. This is Diane Castellano. I'm Vincent's sister. Clara's grip tightened on the phone. I don't know who that is. Yes, you do, just like I know exactly who you are and where you're staying. A pause. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to warn you. About what? About what happens when men try to rewrite rules that have existed for generations. Diane's voice stayed level. Your husband, ex-husband, is at a meeting right now proposing a restructure of how the families operate. It's bold, it's ambitious, and it's going to get him killed if he's not careful. Clara's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? Adrian's proposing a council structure with rotating leadership and enforced accountability. No single head, no consolidation of power, Democratic decisions on territory and operations. Diane laughed, but there was no humor in it. He's trying to turn organized crime into a corporate board. Half the room wants to shoot him on principle. Then why are you calling me? Because the other half is considering it. And if this passes, if he actually pulls this off, it changes everything, including what happens to you and your daughter. Papers rustled in the background. There's a faction that wants to use you as leverage. Make sure Adrian stays in line with whatever gets decided. I'm not part of that faction, but I can't stop them alone. Clara looked down at Elena, sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. What do you want? I want Adrian to succeed. Because he's right, the current system is unstable. We've had 3 territorial wars in 8 months. People are dying. Money's being lost. And all because nobody wants to admit that the old way doesn't work anymore. Diane's voice dropped. But I need you to understand something. If this fails, if Adrian gets voted down or worse, there's going to be retaliation, and you're going to be the target. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. There's a difference. Another pause. I'm sending you a number. If something goes wrong, if you need to run, call it. I'll make sure you have a 12-hour head start before anyone else knows you're gone. Why would you help me? Because I have a daughter too, and I know what it's like to raise her in a world where she's only safe if the men around her maintain power. Diane's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Adrian's trying to build something different, something where safety doesn't require constant violence. I want that for my daughter. I'm willing to help make it happen for yours. The call ended before Clara could respond. A text came through seconds later, a phone number with no name attached. Clara saved it, then pulled up the security monitors again. The guards were still there, still patrolling, but suddenly the house felt less like a fortress and more like a very comfortable cage. Elena stirred, whimpering. Clara shifted her automatically, the movement already becoming instinct. It's okay, baby girl. Daddy's going to fix this. He has to. At 2:45, Adrian's number flashed on her screen. Clara answered before the first ring finished. Tell me you're alive. I'm alive. His voice was rough, strained. The vote passed. Barely. 8-7. But it passed. Relief flooded through her so fast she felt dizzy. What does that mean? It means we have a new structure. Council leadership instead of single authority. Mandatory arbitration for disputes. And he paused. New rules about families. No targeting spouses. No targeting children. Anyone who violates it gets handed to federal authorities by the council itself. Clara closed her eyes. They agreed to that? 3 families pushed back hard, but the others saw the value. Stability is worth more than revenge cycles. The sound of a car door closing. I'm on my way back. We need to talk. About what? About what comes next. He arrived 30 minutes later, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. There was blood on his shirt collar. Not much, but enough to make Clara's heart skip. Whose blood? She demanded. Mine. Small disagreement about implementation details. He touched his split lip gingerly. The other guy looks worse. Adrian, it's handled. He moved to the bassinet, looked down at Elena with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. The council agreed to the new structure, but there are conditions. What kind of conditions? I serve as mediator for the first year. Not leadership, but arbitration. Someone neutral who can interpret the new rules and settle disputes before they escalate. Clara's stomach sank. That means you're still involved. That means I'm involved differently. No operations, no enforcement, just negotiation and consequence management. He turned to face her. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we had. And after the year? After the year, someone else takes over. I transition to pure civilian life. But Clara, he crossed to her, took her hands. This year is going to be dangerous. There are going to be people who test the new system, who push boundaries to see if the consequences are real. I need to know you can handle that, can handle being connected to me while I do this. She wanted to say no, wanted to tell him she couldn't live with that uncertainty, couldn't raise Elena in that shadow. But she looked at his face, at the hope and fear mixing there, and understood that he wasn't just asking about the next year. He was asking if she believed in what he was trying to build. I can handle it, she said, but I have conditions too. Name them. Complete transparency. No more secrets about what's happening or who's threatening us. I need to know everything. Agreed. And marriage counseling, real counseling. If we're going to do this again, we do it right. Adrian blinked. Again? Clara pulled her left hand free, held it up. The ring finger was bare. I took off the wedding ring 8 months ago, but I never stopped being your wife in any way that mattered. So either we do this properly, with therapy and communication and all the messy emotional work, or we stay divorced and co-parent. Those are the options. For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, walls coming down that she'd thought were permanent. I want to do it properly, he said quietly. I want to be your husband again, your real husband, not the one who leaves to protect you, but the one who stays and figures it out with you. Even if it's hard? Especially if it's hard. Elena chose that moment to wake up crying, her small voice filling the room with indignant hunger. Clara laughed despite everything, the absurdity and domesticity of it cutting through the tension. I need to feed her, she said. I'll make you something to eat. Adrian headed for the door, then paused. Clara, thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for coming back. He smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time since the phone rang at 2:11 a.m. Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with their daughter and the fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, possibly, they could actually make this work. The next week blurred into an exhausting routine of feeding schedules and diaper changes and 2-hour sleep cycles. Adrian worked from the house, taking calls in his office, while Clara navigated the steep learning curve of new motherhood. Dr. Mitchell visited twice, checking Elena's weight and Clara's healing, pronouncing both of them healthy despite the chaos. Marcus's security team maintained their presence but tried to stay invisible. Clara appreciated the effort even as their constant patrols reminded her that the danger hadn't disappeared, just recalibrated. On the 8th day, Adrian came into the nursery where Clara was changing Elena. We need to make it official, he said without preamble. Make what official? Elena's birth certificate, her legal status, all of it. He leaned against the doorframe. I've been avoiding it because filing paperwork creates a record, but we can't keep her in limbo. Clara fastened the new diaper, picked Elena up. What are you proposing? We file everything properly. Birth certificate with both our names. My name on all the legal documents. He met her eyes. And we get married again before we do it. Clara's heart stuttered. Adrian, I'm not asking you to decide right now, but think about it. If we're going to build this new life, let's build it on solid ground. Legal protections. Clear documentation. No ambiguity about who Elena belongs to or who has rights to make decisions. That's very practical. That's very strategic. He smiled slightly. But it's also what I want. I want to be your husband again, Clara, legally and actually. I want Elena to grow up knowing her parents are together. And I want to stop pretending that signing divorce papers changed how I feel about you. Elena grabbed Clara's finger, holding tight. Clara looked down at their daughter, then back at Adrian. You're serious about the counseling? I already found someone. Dr. Patricia Harris specializes in high-stress relationships and family dynamics. Marcus vetted her. She's discreet and she's good. You've been planning this. I've been hoping for it. He pushed off the doorframe, crossed to them. I love you. I never stopped. And I'm tired of acting like that's not the most important truth in my life. Clara felt tears building, hot and sudden. I love you too. Even when I hated you for leaving, even when I was so angry I couldn't see straight. So marry me again. He cupped her face with one hand, gentle and certain. Let me do this right. Okay. The word came out barely above a whisper. Okay. Yes. He kissed her then, careful and deep, one hand still cradling her face, while the other settled at the small of her back. Elena made a small sound between them, not quite protest, but close enough that they broke apart laughing. 3 days, Adrian said. I'll arrange everything, just you, me, Elena, and whoever legally needs to be present. No big ceremony? No big anything, just the commitment and the truth. He kissed her forehead. The rest we'll figure out as we go. 3 days later, Clara stood in a judge's chambers wearing a simple dress that Marcus's assistant had somehow procured in her exact size. Adrian wore another of his perfect suits, though this one was gray instead of black. Elena slept in a carrier against Clara's chest, blissfully unaware that her parents were legally binding their lives back together. The ceremony took 7 minutes. Judge Maria Santos read the standard vows, ask the required questions, pronounce them married with efficient warmth. Marcus and Dr. Mitchell signed as witnesses. And just like that, Clara Bennett became Clara Romano again. That was fast, she said as they walked out into afternoon sunlight. That was perfect. Adrian caught her hand, laced their fingers together. Everything else can take as long as it needs. The first counseling session happened 2 days later, Doctor. Harris was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to their abbreviated history, married, divorced, reunited under threat, without visible reaction. So you're rebuilding a relationship while managing ongoing external danger and caring for a newborn, she said. That's 3 major stressors simultaneously. We're aware, Adrian said dryly. Are you? Because most couples can't handle one of those things without significant strain. You're attempting 3 at once while trying to restructure how an entire criminal organization operates. Dr. Harris leaned back in her chair. Let's be very clear about something. This is going to be harder than either of you imagine. There will be moments when you want to quit, moments when the stress feels unsurvivable, and you're going to have to choose over and over to keep working instead of giving up. Clara glanced at Adrian, saw her own uncertainty reflected back. We're willing to try. Willing isn't enough. You need to be committed, completely committed. Dr. Harris pulled out a notepad. So here's my first question. Why are you really doing this? Not the surface answer, the truth. Adrian spoke first. Because I can't imagine a life where Clara and Elena aren't part of it. I tried. For 8 months, I tried. And every day felt like walking around with a piece of myself missing. Dr. Harris turned to Clara. And you? Clara looked down at Elena, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Because I want her to grow up knowing her father, and because... She swallowed hard. Because I'm tired of being afraid alone. If we're going to face the danger, I'd rather face it together. Fear and love, Dr. Harris said. That's honest. We can work with honest. The session lasted 90 minutes. They covered communication patterns, conflict resolution, trust rebuilding. Dr. Harris assigned homework, daily check-ins, active listening exercises, individual reflection time. This isn't going to fix everything overnight, she warned as they left. But if you're consistent, if you're honest, you have a chance. In the car, Clara leaned her head against Adrian's shoulder. That was intense. That was necessary. He kissed her temple. And we're going to keep showing up, both of us. Promise? Promise. That night, after Elena was fed and changed and finally sleeping, Adrian found Clara on the balcony overlooking the city lights. She was wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the distant glow. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much in my head. She didn't turn. Diane Castellano called me again today. Adrian went very still. What did she want? To tell me that 2 families are already testing the new council structure, pushing boundaries to see if the consequences are real. Clara finally looked at him. Is it true? Yes. Small violations so far, but yes, they're testing. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. That's why I'm meeting with the council tomorrow, to show them the consequences are real. How? By enforcing them, publicly, decisively. His jaw tightened. The new system only works if people believe it will be maintained. That means following through even when it's uncomfortable. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. I hate this. I hate that we finally have a chance and the world won't let us just be happy. I know. Adrian turned to face her fully. But this is temporary. 1 year of enforcement, of proving the system works, and then I'm out. Completely out. You really believe that? I have to. He touched her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Because the alternative is living like this forever, and I refuse to raise Elena in permanent crisis. Clara leaned into his touch, let her eyes close. Come to bed. Whatever tomorrow brings, we'll handle it better rested. They went inside together, checked on Elena one final time, then collapsed into bed with the exhausted relief of people who'd survived another day. Adrian pulled Clara against him, her back to his chest, his arm wrapped protective around her waist. I love you, he murmured into her hair. I love you too. She laced her fingers through his. Now shut up and sleep. He laughed quietly, the sound vibrating through both of them. And for a few hours at least, the world outside stayed quiet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new tests of the fragile structure they were trying to build. But tonight, in the darkness of their bedroom with their daughter sleeping nearby, Adrian and Clara Romano held on to each other in the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make this impossible thing work. The call came at dawn, shattering what little sleep Adrian had managed. He answered on the second ring, already sliding out of bed to avoid waking Clara. Romano. Marcus's voice was tight with controlled urgency. We have a situation. Adrian moved to the hallway, closing the bedroom door softly behind him. Talk to me. The Petrov family hit one of the Castellano distribution centers 2 hours ago, burned it to the ground. 3 people dead, all civilians. A pause. They're claiming it was retaliation for a territory dispute, but everyone knows it's really a test of the council's enforcement capabilities. Adrian's hand tightened on the phone. The Petrovs had been one of the 3 families who'd voted against the new structure. Dmitry Petrov had stood up in that meeting and called the council idea weakness disguised as innovation. Now he was proving his point with fire and blood. Where's Dmitry now? Holed up in his compound. He's got 20 armed men on the property, surveillance everywhere. He knows we're coming. Good. Adrian was already moving toward his office, his mind shifting into the cold calculation that had kept him alive through 15 years of conflicts. Call an emergency council session, noon today, and Marcus, make sure every family head understands that attendance is mandatory, not optional. You're going to make an example. I'm going to enforce the rules we all agreed to. Adrian pulled up security footage from the Castellano warehouse on his computer, watching flames consume the building in fast forward. 3 civilian deaths. Workers who'd probably thought they were safe because the new system was supposed to protect non-combatants. Dmitry chose to test us. Now he gets to learn what happens when the test fails. He spent the next 3 hours building the case. Security footage, witness statements, financial records proving the attack was coordinated rather than spontaneous. By the time Clara emerged from the bedroom with Elena, Adrian had assembled an airtight prosecution. You're up early, Clara said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Elena was awake and alert, her dark eyes tracking movement with increasing focus. Petrov family violated the agreement, killed 3 civilians in a warehouse fire. He didn't look up from his laptop. I'm presenting the evidence to the council at noon. Clara's face went pale. What does that mean? It means Dmitry Petrov gets turned over to federal authorities. All the evidence I've kept on his operations over the years goes with him. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Adrian finally met her eyes. And every other family head gets to watch it happen. Gets to understand that the consequences are real. This is what you meant by enforcement. This is exactly what I meant. He closed the laptop, leaned back. The system only works if people believe violating it costs more than following it. Dmitry just provided the perfect opportunity to prove that. Elena made a small sound, not quite distressed, but heading that direction. Clara shifted her automatically, the movement already becoming instinct after 2 weeks of constant practice. When do you leave? 10:30. Marcus is driving me. Adrian stood, crossed to them, bent down to kiss Elena's forehead, then Clara's. I'll be back by 3, 4 at the latest. And if something goes wrong? Then Marcus gets you out exactly like we planned. He cupped Clara's face gently. But nothing's going to go wrong. This is straightforward. Present evidence, call the vote, execute the consequences. Dmitry doesn't get a say. Clara caught his wrist, held tight. I know you have to do this. I know it's necessary. But Adrian, her voice dropped. Don't lose yourself in it. Don't become the person you were before. He understood what she meant. The version of himself who'd made decisions based purely on strategy and power, who'd treated people like chess pieces, who'd chosen fear over every other option because fear was reliable. That Adrian Romano had been effective but empty. And Clara was terrified he'd slip back into that skin without noticing. I won't, he promised. This isn't about power. It's about protection. There's a difference. Just remember that, please. He kissed her properly then, slow and deep, trying to convey everything he couldn't say with words. When he pulled back, her eyes were wet but determined. Come home safe, she whispered. Always. The council met in a neutral location, a renovated industrial building that had been swept 3 times for surveillance devices. The conference room was austere, concrete walls, reinforced windows, a single table large enough for 15 people. Security was heavy but professional, Marcus's team coordinating with each family's personal protection to ensure everyone felt safe enough to be honest. Adrian arrived exactly on time. The other family heads were already seated, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Diane Castellano sat at the far end, her face carefully neutral. Vincent's absence was conspicuous. He was still in federal custody, facing charges that would keep him locked up for decades. Dmitry Petrov sat directly across from where Adrian would stand, his posture radiating defiance. He was a broad man in his 50s, gray threading through dark hair, eyes that had seen too much violence to be impressed by threats. Beside him sat his consigliere, Anton Volkov, whose connection to the syndicate that had tried to use Clara as leverage was probably not coincidental. Adrian set his laptop on the table, connected it to the room's projection system. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We're here because someone decided to test whether this council actually has teeth." He pulled up the first image, the Castellano warehouse engulfed in flames. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Fire was visceral, undeniable. It demanded reaction. At 3:47 this morning, the Petrov family orchestrated an attack on Castellano property. 3 civilians died in the resulting fire. All 3 were warehouse workers with no connection to family operations. All 3 were supposed to be protected under the new non-combatant rules we established. Adrian's voice stayed level, factual. "This is a direct violation of our agreement." Dmitry leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "That's a serious accusation. You have proof?" Adrian pulled up the next slide, security footage showing 2 men in Petrov colors approaching the warehouse with accelerant. "Your men, your colors, your operation. Could be faked. Could be." Adrian pulled up financial records. "But these wire transfers from your personal accounts to the 2 men in question, sent 6 hours before the fire, those are harder to fake." The room went quiet. Evidence was one thing. Financial trails that could be handed to federal investigators were something else entirely. Diane spoke first. "This seems clear-cut. Dmitry violated the agreement. The consequences should be applied." "The consequences are excessive," Anton interjected smoothly. "Perhaps a fine would be more appropriate, or redistribution of territory." "The consequences were agreed upon by every person in this room." Adrian looked directly at Dmitry. "You voted against the structure. That's your right. But once the vote passed, you agreed to abide by the rules. Breaking them doesn't get you a negotiation. It gets you exactly what we all decided would happen." Dmitry's jaw tightened. "You're talking about turning me over to federal authorities." "I'm talking about enforcing the agreement. Yes, that includes cooperation with law enforcement for major violations. That's what everyone signed off on." "This is insane." Dmitry stood, his chair scraping harsh against concrete. "You want to hand family leadership to the feds? Set that precedent? I want to prove that rules mean something." Adrian didn't move, didn't raise his voice. "You killed 3 innocent people to make a point about power. Now the council makes a point about consequences. That's how the system works." "The system is a fantasy." Dmitry's voice rose. "You think you can change centuries of how we operate with some corporate board structure? I think you're scared." Adrian cut through the bluster with cold precision. "You're scared because the old way gave you absolute authority and the new way requires consensus. You're scared because burning warehouses and killing civilians used to be acceptable tactics and now they're liability. You're scared because power doesn't protect you anymore when you violate the rules everyone agreed to follow." The silence that followed was absolute. Dmitry's face had gone red with fury, but he said nothing. Couldn't say anything without confirming exactly what Adrian had accused. Adrian turned to the rest of the council. "Vote. Dmitry Petrov violated the non-combatant clause through deliberate action that resulted in 3 civilian deaths. Does the council enforce consequences as outlined in our agreement?" Diane raised her hand immediately. "Yes." One by one, the others followed. Some hesitated. Some looked uncomfortable. But in the end, the vote was 11-3. Only Dmitry's closest allies voted no. "The council has spoken." Adrian pulled out his phone, dialed a number everyone in the room recognized. "This is Adrian Romano. I'm ready to provide evidence and testimony regarding the activities of Dmitry Petrov." Dmitry lunged across the table, but Marcus was faster. He had Dmitry's arm twisted behind his back before the older man could get within 3 feet of Adrian, forcing him down to his knees with professional efficiency. "You're finished," Dmitry snarled. "You think this makes you strong? This makes you weak. You just proved you'll betray family to save your precious system." "I proved I'll enforce consequences to protect innocent people." Adrian crouched down, met Dimitri's furious gaze at eye level. And you're not family. You're a liability. There's a difference. Federal agents arrived within 20 minutes. They'd been waiting 3 blocks away, ready to move on Adrian's signal. Dimitri was led out in handcuffs, still cursing, still threatening. Anton Volkov wisely kept his mouth shut, but his expression promised future problems. When the room cleared, Diane approached Adrian. That was risky. That was necessary. Same thing in our world. She glanced at the door where Dimitri had been taken. You've made enemies today. I made a point today. The enemies were already there. Adrian started packing up his laptop. How's your family handling the transition? Better than expected. The warehouse loss hurt, but the council's response helps. Shows the system can protect us when we're targeted. She hesitated. Clara called me last week. Asked about security protocols for children. Adrian's hands stilled. What did you tell her? The truth. That keeping kids safe in this world requires constant vigilance and good intelligence networks. That sometimes the best protection is making sure nobody wants to target them in the first place. Diane's expression softened slightly. She's smart, and she's tougher than you probably give her credit for. I know exactly how tough she is. That's not the issue. Then what is? Adrian looked at Diane, this woman who'd helped protect Clara when she didn't have to, who'd voted for a system that reduced her own family's power because it was the right thing to do. The issue is that I'm trying to build something different while still operating in the old world, and I don't know if that's possible or just naive. Probably both. Diane smiled slightly. But naive people don't usually survive in this business long enough to try changing it, so maybe you've got a chance. The drive back to the safe house took 40 minutes through mid-afternoon traffic. Adrian spent most of it on the phone, coordinating the handover of Dimitri's territories to neutral management, ensuring the transition wouldn't create new power vacuums. By the time Marcus pulled through the security gates, Adrian's head was pounding with exhaustion. Clara met him at the door, Elena asleep in her arms. She took one look at his face and stepped aside. It's done? It's done. Dimitri's in federal custody. His operations are being dissolved. The council voted to enforce consequences. Adrian dropped his keys on the entry table, scrubbed a hand over his face. And I need a drink. Shower first. You smell like warehouse concrete and tension. Clara shifted Elena carefully. I'll pour you something after you're clean. The shower helped. Hot water and steam washing away the last 3 hours. The weight of the decision. The look on Dimitri's face when the handcuffs clicked shut. Adrian stood under the spray until his skin turned pink, until some of the knots in his shoulders loosened. When he emerged, Clara was in the bedroom with 2 glasses of whiskey. Elena was in her bassinet, still sleeping. The evening light slanted golden through the windows, peaceful and domestic. Dr. Harris called, Claire said, handing him a glass. Wants to schedule our next session for Thursday. That works? Adrian drank, let the burn ground him. How was Elena today? Fussy. I think she's starting to teeth early, which seems unfair for a 2-week-old. Clara settled onto the bed, tucking her legs under her. But she finally went down about an hour ago. We should have at least 90 minutes before she wakes up demanding food. 90 minutes of peace. Adrian sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Feels like a vacation. Clara laughed, the sound tired but genuine. Our lives are so weird now. 90 minutes without a crying baby counts as luxury. Our lives were weird before. Now they're just differently weird. He set down his glass, turned to face her properly. I turned a man over to federal authorities today. Sent him to prison for the rest of his life. And the whole drive home, all I could think about was getting back here. To you and Elena. To normal things like dirty diapers and 3 a.m. feedings. Clara's eyes were soft in the fading light. Is that a bad thing? It's a different thing. The old me would have been strategizing next moves, calculating power shifts, planning how to leverage Dimitri's removal. Adrian reached out, traced the line of her jaw with one finger. The new me just wants to be home. The new you is still strategizing. I can see your brain working even when you're trying to relax. She caught his hand, pressed a kiss to his palm. But you're right that it's different. You're choosing what matters. That's growth. Elena stirred in the bassinet, making small sounds that suggested waking. Clara sighed. So much for 90 minutes. I'll get her. Adrian stood, moved to the bassinet. Elena's eyes were open, unfocused but alert. He picked her up carefully, still slightly terrified of her fragility. of how much trust it took to hold something so small and vital. "Hey, baby girl, you're okay. Daddy's got you." Clara watched them, her expression unreadable. "You're good at that." At what? Being her father. "You look so uncertain at first, like you might break her if you held her wrong. Now you're confident, natural." "I'm faking confidence really well." Adrian supported Elena's head, swayed slightly. "Inside, I'm still terrified I'm going to mess this up." Welcome to parenthood. That feeling never goes away, according to Dr. Mitchell. Clara stood, crossed to them. "But we're doing okay. She's healthy. We're functional. The house hasn't burned down. The bar for success has gotten pretty low." "The bar for success has gotten realistic." Clara rested her head against his shoulder, both of them looking down at Elena. "We survived the first 2 weeks. Everything after this is just repetition and minor variations." Adrian kissed the top of Clara's head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "I love you, both of you, more than I knew it was possible to love anything." "I know." Clara's arm came around his waist, holding tight. "I feel it too, this overwhelming, terrifying love that makes everything else seem insignificant." They stood like that for a long moment, the three of them forming a small circle of warmth and connection. Outside, the security team maintained their patrols. Somewhere in the city, the families were adjusting to new power structures. Federal agents were processing Dmitry Petrov's arrest. The world kept turning, kept generating threats and challenges and chaos. But inside this room, Adrian and Clara Romano held their daughter and each other, and for now, that was enough. Elena started crying in earnest, her face scrunching up with indignation. Clara laughed, taking her from Adrian's arms. Okay, I hear you. Food time." Adrian watched Clara settle into the nursing chair, watched Elena latch with determined efficiency. The domesticity of it still struck him as surreal. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a divorced man living alone, trying to convince himself that distance was the same as safety. Now he had a wife and a daughter and a future that looked nothing like what he'd planned. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Volkov made contact, wants to negotiate terms for taking over Petrov operations." Adrian stared at the message, his jaw tightening. Anton Volkov, who'd sat beside Dmitry during the council meeting, who'd voted against enforcement, who was now trying to profit from his boss's removal. "Work?" Clara asked, watching his expression. "Volkov wants to discuss taking over Petrov's territory." Adrian typed a quick response. "Council oversight required for any transfers, no individual deals." Then he put the phone face down on the dresser. "But that's a tomorrow problem. Tonight we're off duty." "Are we ever really off duty anymore?" "We are for the next..." Adrian checked his watch. 4 hours until Elena's next feeding, during which time we're going to eat actual dinner, watch something mindless on television, and pretend we're normal people. Normal people don't have armed security patrols around their house. Then we'll pretend really hard. Clara smiled, but there was sadness underneath it. I miss normal. I miss grocery shopping and coffee dates and worrying about things like traffic and whether I remembered to pay the electric bill. We'll get back to that. Not all of it, maybe, but most of it. Adrian moved to this window, looking out at the manicured grounds and the distant city lights. 1 year of enforcement, 1 year of proving the system works. Then we transition to real civilian life. You keep saying that. Do you actually believe it? The question hung in the air between them. Adrian wanted to say yes automatically, to reassure her that everything would work out exactly as planned. But Clara deserved honesty, not comfort. I believe it's possible, he said finally. I believe if we're smart and careful and a little bit lucky, we can make it happen. But I also know that plans change, that unexpected things happen, that control is mostly an illusion. That's not very reassuring. It's realistic. He turned back to face her. I can't promise you perfect safety or guaranteed outcomes, but I can promise I'll keep fighting for the life we want. The boring, normal, civilian life where our biggest stress is Elena's teething schedule. Clara looked down at Elena, who'd finished eating and was now drowsily content against her chest. I'm scared, Adrian, all the time. Every car that passes too slowly, every phone call, every time you leave for a meeting, I'm terrified it's going to be the thing that breaks us. I know. He crossed to them, knelt beside the chair. I'm scared too, but we're scared together now. That has to count for something. Does it? It means when things get hard, we don't face them alone. It means when I'm making decisions, I'm thinking about you and Elena first. It means he took her free hand, held tight. It means we're building something worth protecting, and that gives me a reason to be strategic instead of just ruthless. Elena made a small sound, milk-drunk and peaceful. Clara shifted her to her shoulder, patting gently. Dr. Harris asked me in our last session what I was most afraid of. I told her I was afraid of losing you, of something happening that takes you away permanently. And what did she say? She said that fear is valid but shouldn't be paralyzing, that I need to acknowledge it and then choose to keep living anyway. Clara's eyes met his. So that's what I'm trying to do. Acknowledge that I'm terrified and choose to trust you anyway. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest, raw and tender. Thank you for trusting me, for giving me this chance. Thank me by keeping your promises, by coming home every time, by building the life we both want. I will. He stood, leaned down to kiss her. I promise. The rest of the evening passed in comfortable domesticity. They ate dinner while Elena slept in her bouncer on the kitchen table, both of them watching her with the intensity of new parents who couldn't quite believe this tiny person existed. They watched half of a movie before exhaustion caught up with them, Clara falling asleep against Adrian's shoulder on the couch. He carried her to bed without waking her, then checked on Elena one final time. She was sleeping soundly, her small chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. Adrian stood over the bassinet for a long moment, watching his daughter exist, feeling the weight of responsibility and love press against his ribs. His phone lit up with another message, this time from Diane. Volkov's making moves, reaching out to families who voted against enforcement, building a coalition. Adrian's jaw tightened. He'd expected this. Dmitri's removal created a power vacuum, and Anton Volkov was positioning himself to fill it. The question was whether Volkov would work within the new system or try to undermine it. He typed back, "Keep me informed. Don't engage directly yet." Diane's response came immediately. "Understood. But Adrian, this is going to get messy before it gets clean." He knew she was right. Change was always messy. People who'd benefited from the old system would fight to preserve it or restore it. The next few months would be a constant battle between the council structure he'd built and the traditional hierarchies that had existed for generations. But looking down at Elena, at the peaceful innocence of her sleeping face, Adrian felt his resolve harden. He'd burn down every threat, dismantle every opposition, enforce every consequence necessary to protect this small, perfect life. The ruthlessness hadn't disappeared. It had just found a new purpose. Clara stirred in the bedroom, calling his name softly. Adrian took one last look at Elena, then went to his wife. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new tests of the fragile peace he'd negotiated. But tonight, he climbed into bed beside Clara, pulled her close, and let himself believe that maybe, possibly, they could actually make this impossible dream into reality. The world outside could wait until morning. For now, in the darkness of their bedroom, with their daughter sleeping nearby, Adrian Romano allowed himself to be just a husband and father. Just a man trying to protect his family. Just someone hoping that love might be stronger than violence, that structure might be more powerful than chaos, that choosing differently could actually make a difference. Sleep came slowly, his mind still running through scenarios and contingencies. But Clara's steady breathing beside him, the solid reality of her presence, eventually pulled him under. And for a few hours at least, the war paused long enough for rest. When his phone rang at 4:23 a.m., Adrian knew immediately that the pause was over. He answered without looking at the screen, already sliding out of bed. "Talk to me." Marcus's voice was tight. "Volkov just hit 3 council-aligned businesses simultaneously, all non-violent, all property damage. But the message is clear. He's declaring himself opposition." Adrian's blood went cold, then hot, fury rising swift and sharp. Casualties? None. He was careful about that, probably trying to avoid triggering the same consequences that took down Dmitri. Smart. Adrian was already getting dressed, his movements economical and practiced. But not smart enough. Call an emergency session. 6 a.m. every family head. And Marcus, this time we don't vote, we act. Understood. Adrian ended the call, turned to find Clara sitting up in bed, her face pale in the darkness. It's starting again. It never stopped. It just paused. He finished buttoning his shirt, grabbed his jacket. "I'll be back by noon." "Adrian, I have to handle this now, before it escalates into something worse. He crossed to her, kissed her hard. I love you. Keep Elena safe. Marcus is leaving 2 extra guards here. Then he was gone, moving through the dark house with purpose and controlled fury. The war for control wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase, and Anton Volkov was about to learn that testing the council's resolve was very different from breaking it. The city was still sleeping as Adrian's car cut through empty streets toward the meeting location. But inside his mind, strategy was already forming, consequences were being calculated, and the cold, ruthless part of himself that had built an empire was waking up with terrible clarity. This was the cost of change. This was the price of building something different. And Adrian Romano was prepared to pay it, no matter how high it climbed. The emergency council session convened in a different location this time. A repurposed bank vault with walls thick enough to survive a direct missile strike. Adrian arrived first, his suit immaculate despite the early hour, his expression carved from ice. Marcus had already set up the evidence. 3 screens showing simultaneous footage of Volkov's coordinated attacks on council-aligned properties. The family heads filtered in over the next 20 minutes, most of them looking as sleep-deprived and furious as Adrian felt. Diane Castellano arrived with dark circles under her eyes and murder in her expression. The warehouse that had burned weeks ago belonged to her family. These new attacks felt personal. Anton Volkov was conspicuously absent. Adrian waited until everyone was seated before speaking. At 3:47 this morning, Anton Volkov orchestrated simultaneous attacks on 3 council-protected businesses: the Castellano import warehouse, the Chen family's distribution center, and the Martinez shipping facility. All 3 were hit within a 5-minute window. No casualties, but significant property damage. He pulled up the security footage, letting it play without commentary. Masked men approaching with incendiary devices. Controlled burns that destroyed inventory but left structures mostly intact. Professional execution that spoke to careful planning. Volkov's sending a message, Diane said, her voice tight. He's proving he can coordinate complex operations without triggering the same consequences that took down Dmitri. He's also testing how we respond to attacks that don't result in deaths, added Michael Chen, the young head of his family's operations, seeing if property damage alone is enough to warrant council action. Adrian looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. The question isn't whether this warrants action. It clearly does. The question is what kind of action sends the right message without escalating into open warfare. We could hit back, suggested Carlos Martinez. Take out some of his properties, show him we can play the same game. That's exactly what he wants. Adrian pulled up a new document, financial records he'd been compiling since Dmitri's arrest. Volkov's been systematically moving his legitimate assets into offshore accounts and shell companies. He's preparing for either a takeover attempt or a long siege. If we respond with property destruction, we're playing into his strategy. Then what do you suggest? Diane leaned forward. Because sitting here and doing nothing makes us look weak. I suggest we use the one thing Volkov doesn't expect: transparency. Adrian pulled up another file, this one containing detailed information about Volkov's operations, his financial structure, his key personnel. We don't hit his properties. We expose his entire network to federal authorities. Bank accounts, shipping routes, corrupt officials he's paying off, everything. The room went very quiet. What Adrian was suggesting went far beyond turning over one person for a specific crime. He was talking about dismantling an entire organization by cooperation with law enforcement. That's a dangerous precedent, Michael said carefully. Today, it's Volkov. Tomorrow, it could be any of us who steps out of line. That's exactly the point. Adrian's voice was hard. The old system protected everyone as long as they maintained the hierarchy. The new system protects everyone as long as they follow the rules. Volkov violated the rules. He gets the consequences. Anyone else who violates them gets the same treatment. You're talking about making us all vulnerable to exposure, Carlos objected. I'm talking about making rule-breaking more costly than rule-following. Adrian stood, pacing the length of the room. Every person in this room has operations that wouldn't survive federal scrutiny. That's the reality of our world. But as long as we operate within the council structure, as long as we respect the boundaries we established, that scrutiny doesn't come. The moment someone decides the rules don't apply to them, he turned to face them. That's when we use every tool available to remove the threat. Diane was the first to speak. I vote yes. Volkov attacked 3 of our families. He needs to face real consequences. One by one, the others joined her. Some quickly, some reluctantly, but in the end, the vote was unanimous. Anton Volkov would be exposed, his operations dismantled, his organization handed to federal authorities piece by piece. There's one more thing, Adrian said as people began gathering their belongings. Volkov won't go quietly. He'll retaliate, and the most obvious target is me and my family. The room went still again. Everyone understood what he was really saying, that by being the face of enforcement, by being the one who pushed hardest for consequences, Adrian had painted a target on Clara and Elena. We can provide additional security, Michael offered. My family owes you for the protection framework. We'll contribute resources. Same from us, Carlos added. Whatever you need. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. The council wasn't just a theoretical structure anymore. It was becoming real, people choosing collective protection over individual power. Thank you, he said simply. Marcus will coordinate integration of your teams with mine. The meeting broke up with unusual efficiency, everyone understanding the urgency. Adrian was the last to leave, standing alone in the vault and staring at Volkov's financial records on the screens. This was the gamble. If it worked, if Volkov's exposure convinced other potential rebels that the cost was too high, then the council structure might actually survive. If it failed, if this triggered a wider conflict, then everything he'd built would collapse. His phone rang, Clara's number. Hey, he answered, trying to sound less exhausted than he felt. Everything okay? Elena's fine, I'm fine. The house is still standing. A pause. But Adrian, there's a car parked at the end of the driveway. It's been there for 20 minutes. Marcus's team checked it out. It's empty. Engine running, no one inside. Adrian's blood went cold. Get to the panic room. Now. Already here. Marcus moved us the moment they spotted it. Claire's voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. What's happening? Volkov's making a move, trying to scare us, probably. Maybe worse. Adrian was already running for his car, Marcus at his heels. Stay in the panic room until I get there. Do not come out for anyone except me or Marcus. Understood? Understood. The drive back to the safe house was the longest 30 minutes of Adrian's life. His mind ran through scenarios: car bomb, distraction for a ground assault, psychological warfare designed to keep them off balance. By the time they cleared the security gates, he'd mentally prepared for all of them. The mysterious car was still there, idling at the end of the drive. Marcus's team had established a perimeter around it, weapons drawn but not yet engaging. Smart. Don't escalate until you know what you're dealing with. Adrian approached on foot, Marcus beside him, both of them moving with the careful precision of people who'd done this too many times to be reckless. The car was a black sedan, windows tinted, nothing distinctive about it. Could be anyone's vehicle. Could be anything inside. Bomb squad's en route, Marcus said quietly. ETA 15 minutes. We don't have 15 minutes. Adrian pulled out his phone, dialed the number that connected directly to the panic room. Clara, I need you to access the security cameras. Do you see anyone approaching the house from any angle? A pause while she checked. No, just your team and the car. Okay, stay put. I'm going to check the vehicle. Adrian, that's insane. Stay put. I love you. He ended the call before she could argue further. Marcus was already pulling on protective gear, the lightweight kind that might stop shrapnel but wouldn't do much against a real explosive. Adrian did the same, moving on autopilot. This was the cost of the life he'd chosen. This was the price of enforcement. They approached the car from opposite sides, weapons drawn. The engine was still running, exhaust visible in the cool morning air. Adrian reached the driver's door first, peered through the tinted window. Empty, just like the security team had said. But on the dashboard, clearly visible, was an envelope. This is a setup, Marcus said. Classic intimidation play. Make us think it's a bomb, turn out to be a message. Or it's both. Adrian tried the door handle. Locked. We need to check the trunk. Marcus circled around, examined the back of the vehicle. Trunk secure, no visible wires or triggers. He pulled out a slim tool, worked the lock with practiced efficiency. The trunk popped open with a soft click. Inside was a single box, wrapped in plain brown paper. No ticking, no wires. Just a box and another envelope. Adrian reached for it, ignoring Marcus's protest. If this was meant to kill him, Volkov would have used something more certain than a random package. This was theater, psychological warfare. The envelope contained a single photograph. Clara, walking through a park with Elena in a stroller. Taken recently, judging by what she was wearing. Taken close enough to show details. Taken by someone who'd been following her without the security team noticing. Adrian's vision tunneled, rage so complete it felt like ice in his veins. Volkov had gotten close to his family, had stalked them, had documented it, and sent it back as proof that he could reach them whenever he wanted. "Boss?" Marcus's voice was tight. "The box." Adrian opened it carefully, his hand steady despite the fury. Inside was Elena's stuffed rabbit, the one that had gone missing from the nursery 2 days ago. They'd thought it had been misplaced in the chaos of daily life, but Volkov had taken it, had been in their home, had been close enough to their daughter to take her toy. The second envelope was tucked beneath the rabbit. Adrian opened it with fingers that wanted to crush and tear. The note was typed, impersonal. The council thinks it can change the rules, but some rules are older than structures, older than votes. You took everything from Dmitri for killing 3 nobodies. I'll take everything from you for killing the old ways, your family, your wife, your daughter. Everything you love becomes leverage. Welcome to the real war. Adrian read it twice, each word carving itself into his consciousness with brutal clarity. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call he'd hoped never to make. "This is Adrian Romano. I need to speak to Director Pierce. Tell her it's an emergency and it involves Anton Volkov." The call connected through 3 layers of security before a woman's voice came on the line. "Mr. Romano, this is unexpected. Director Pierce, I have evidence that Anton Volkov has committed breaking and entering, stalking, and made credible threats against my family, including my infant daughter." Adrian's voice was flat, professional. "I'm prepared to provide you with everything I have on his entire operation in exchange for immediate federal protection for my wife and child." "That's quite an offer. What's the catch?" "No catch. I want Volkov in custody within the hour. I want him charged with everything you can make stick. And I want my family protected while that happens." Adrian looked at the photograph, at Clara's smile captured by a stalker's lens. "After that, I'll give you enough evidence to dismantle his organization completely. We'll need to verify the threat is credible. I'm standing next to a car that was left at my property with a stolen item from my daughter's nursery and photographs of my wife being surveilled. How much more credible do you need?" A pause. "Stay where you are. We'll have a team there in 30 minutes. The FBI arrived with impressive speed, 3 vehicles full of agents who swept the property with professional efficiency. Director Sarah Pierce was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for taking down organized crime figures who thought they were untouchable. She examined the photograph, the rabbit, the threatening note, with the focused intensity of someone building a case. "This is good," she said, photographing everything for evidence. "Stalking, breaking and entering, terrorist threats. We can hold him on this while we build the larger case." "How long until you can arrest him?" Adrian asked. "His location is known. We can have him in custody within 2 hours. She looked up from the evidence. "But, Mr. Romano, you understand what you're doing here? Once we arrest Volkov on these charges, once you provide testimony and evidence, you're crossing a line that can't be uncrossed. I crossed that line when I turned over Dmitry Petrov. This is just reinforcing the message." "The message being?" "That the rules apply to everyone, that threatening families has consequences." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And that I will burn down anyone who comes near my wife and daughter." Pierce nodded slowly. "Fair enough. We'll take it from here. I'll need you to come in and give a formal statement, but we can do that after Volkov's in custody." Adrian turned to Marcus. "Get Clara and Elena. We're leaving." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere Volkov doesn't know about. Somewhere nobody knows about, except you and me." Adrian pulled out his phone, sent a quick text to a number he hadn't used in years. "There's a property upstate, off the books, not connected to any of my holdings. We'll be safe there while this plays out." Marcus nodded, already moving toward the house. Adrian followed, his mind shifting through logistics and contingencies. They'd need supplies, security equipment, a way to stay connected without being traced. 48 hours, maybe 72. However long it took for federal authorities to secure Volkov and dismantle his immediate network. Clara met them at the panic room door, Elena clutched tight against her chest. Her face was pale but composed, fear controlled through sheer force of will. Pack a bag, Adrian said without preamble. Enough for 3 days. We're leaving in 15 minutes. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. Somewhere Volkov can't find us. Trust me. She nodded, disappeared into the bedroom. Adrian could hear her moving quickly, efficiently, packing with the speed of someone who'd learned not to waste time in crisis. Elena started crying, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. Marcus appeared with 2 duffel bags of equipment: satellite phones, emergency medical supplies, weapons, portable security system. Everything we might need for a few days off-grid. Good. Adrian checked his own weapon, the familiar weight of it both comforting and terrible. He'd hoped to leave this part of his life behind, hoped that walking away from operations meant walking away from violence. But violence had followed him anyway, had found the seams in his protection and exploited them ruthlessly. Clara emerged with a single bag, Elena now quiet in her carrier. I'm ready. They loaded into an unmarked SUV, Marcus driving, Adrian in the back with Clara and Elena. The route took them through back roads and industrial areas, places where surveillance was sparse and traffic cameras were few. Adrian watched the mirrors constantly, looking for tails, for patterns, for anything that suggested they'd been followed. The safe house was 2 hours north, buried in the mountains where cell service was spotty, and the nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. It had been Adrian's contingency plan for years, a place to disappear if everything went completely wrong. He'd never thought he'd actually use it, never thought circumstances would force him this far off the grid. The property looked abandoned from the road, overgrown drive, weathered exterior, no visible security. But Adrian knew better. The cameras were hidden, the reinforced structure invisible beneath the rustic facade, the escape routes carefully planned and maintained. This was a fortress that looked like a forgotten cabin. Marcus swept the interior while Adrian got Clara and Elena settled. The inside was sparse but functional: bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, and a main room with communication equipment and supplies. Not comfortable, but safe. I hate this, Clara said, settling Elena into a portable crib that Marcus had somehow produced. I hate running. I hate hiding. I hate that our lives are like this. I know. Adrian checked the security monitors, watched the perimeter cameras cycle through their feeds. But it's temporary, 48 hours, maybe less. Then Volkov's in custody and we can go home. Can we? She turned to face him, exhaustion and fear mixing in her expression. Or is this just going to keep happening? Different enemies, different threats, same terror? It was the question Adrian had been avoiding, the truth he didn't want to face. That enforcing the new system meant making enemies. That being the face of consequences meant becoming the target of everyone who hated change. That protecting Clara and Elena required putting them in constant danger. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I could build something different. Thought I could create a structure that protected everyone without requiring me to be the enforcer. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe... Elena started crying, hungry and indignant. Clara picked her up automatically, began the familiar routine of feeding. Adrian watched them, this small, perfect piece of his life that existed in the middle of chaos. His phone buzzed. A text from Director Pierce. Volkov in custody, arrested at his home without incident. Formal charges being filed now. Relief flooded through him so fast he had to sit down. They got him. Volkov's in federal custody. Clara's eyes closed, tears slipping free. Thank God. We still need to stay here until we're certain his people aren't planning retaliation. But Clara... Adrian crossed to her, knelt beside the chair. The worst is over. Dmitri's gone. Volkov's gone. The 2 biggest threats to the council structure are being dismantled. And after them? There'll be others. There's always others. Maybe. Probably. He took her free hand, held tight. But each time we enforce consequences, each time we prove the system works, it gets a little easier. People start believing the rules are real, start choosing compliance over conflict. You really think that'll work? I think it has to work, because the alternative is going back to the old way. Endless cycles of violence and retaliation. Power structures built on fear instead of agreement. Adrian looked at Elena, peacefully nursing, completely unaware of the danger that had circled so close. I won't raise our daughter in that world. I'll enforce every consequence, dismantle every threat, burn down every challenge until the new system is strong enough to sustain itself. Clara studied his face, seeing something there that made her expression soften. You've changed, since Elena was born. You're still strategic, still calculating, but there's something different. I have something worth protecting now, something more important than power or control or legacy. He touched Elena's small hand, felt her fingers curl around his thumb with surprising strength. Everything I do now is about making sure she grows up safe, that she never has to be afraid of her father's world. They stayed in the mountain's safe house for 3 days while federal authorities processed Volkov's arrest and began dismantling his organization. Adrian coordinated with the council remotely, using encrypted satellite communications to ensure continuity. The other family heads rallied, some offering additional security resources, others volunteering to help absorb Volkov's legitimate operations to prevent another power vacuum. Director Pierce called on the second day with an update. Volkov's talking, trying to negotiate a deal by providing information on other organizations. We're not interested in his information, but the fact that he's willing to sell out his own people tells you everything about his character. Will the charges stick? Adrian asked. Between the stalking evidence, the breaking and entering, and the terrorist threats, we have him cold on the immediate charges. The larger Racco case will take months to build, but we'll get there. He's not seeing the outside of a prison cell for a very long time. Good. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. Romano. This arrest gives us leverage on 3 other investigations. You've been more helpful than you probably realize. After the call, Adrian found Clara on the cabin's small porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Elena was asleep in her carrier, small face peaceful in the golden light. Pierce says the charges will stick, he said, settling beside her. Volkov's done. 2 down. How many more to go? Hopefully none. The message is sent. The consequences are real. Anyone else who wants to test the system has 2 very clear examples of what happens. Adrian put his arm around her shoulders, pulled her close. Tomorrow we go home. Back to real life, back to normal. I'm not sure we have normal anymore. Then we build a new normal. One that includes security protocols and encrypted communications, but also includes things like family dinners and Elena's first smile and all the ordinary moments that matter more than any of this. Clara leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. I'm tired, Adrian. Bone tired, soul tired. I don't know how much more of this I can take. You don't have to take much more. I promise. He kissed the top of her head. 1 year. We agreed on 1 year of me serving as mediator, of enforcing the new structure. We're already a month into that year. 11 more months, and then I'm completely out. Full civilian life. No more council, no more enforcement, no more war. You really think they'll let you walk away after the year is up? They won't have a choice. That's part of the agreement. 1 year of transition, then someone else takes over the mediation role. Adrian looked out at the darkening mountains, at the peaceful isolation. I've already started identifying potential replacements. People who believe in the system but don't carry my history. Fresh leadership for a fresh structure. Elena stirred, making small sounds that suggested waking. Clara picked her up, swayed gently. She's going to start teething soon. Dr. Mitchell warned me it could be rough. The shift in topic was deliberate, both of them needing to talk about something ordinary and manageable. Adrian welcomed it, let himself focus on the mundane concerns of parenthood instead of the life and death stakes of the last few weeks. What does that mean exactly? He asked. It means she'll be fussy and in pain and probably won't sleep well. It means we'll be walking her around at 2 a.m. trying to soothe her. It means... Clara smiled slightly. It means normal parenting problems instead of criminal empire problems. I'll take it. Any day of the week, I'll take teething over assassination attempts. They went inside as full darkness fell, securing the cabin for the night. Marcus had returned to the city to coordinate with federal authorities, leaving them alone with the security system and a satellite phone for emergencies. It should have felt isolating, dangerous. Instead, it felt almost peaceful. Adrian made dinner while Clara fed Elena, the domestic routine grounding them both. They ate at the small kitchen table, talking about nothing important. What books they wanted to read, what kind of stroller would work best for hiking, whether Elena would inherit Adrian's dark hair or Clara's lighter coloring. I like this, Clara said as they were cleaning up. Just us. No security teams, no council business, just our family. We can have more of it. After the year is up, we'll be completely private citizens. Maybe we move somewhere quieter, somewhere Elena can grow up without constant surveillance. Like where? I don't know. Somewhere with good schools and low crime and neighbors who've never heard the name Romano. Adrian put away the last dish, turned to face her. Somewhere we can be boring and ordinary and anonymous. That sounds like heaven. Elena started crying, the sharp sound of hunger rather than distress. Clara picked her up, began the familiar dance of nighttime feeding. Adrian watched them, his wife and daughter, and felt something settle in his chest. Purpose, direction. The absolute certainty that everything he was doing, every risk, every conflict, every brutal decision was worth it for this. His phone buzzed. A message from Diane. Council vote tomorrow on Volkov's territory distribution. Your presence requested but not required. Adrian typed back. I'll be there. Time? 2 p.m., same location as last meeting. He showed Clara the message. I need to be at a council meeting tomorrow afternoon, just to vote on how Volkov's operations get redistributed. Shouldn't take more than a couple hours. Her expression tightened, but she nodded. Okay, just be careful. Always. That night they slept in the cabin's single bedroom, Elena's portable crib beside the bed. Adrian woke every few hours, his body still programmed for threat assessment, checking the security feeds and the perimeter alarms. Everything stayed quiet, peaceful. The kind of night that felt too good to trust. But morning came without incident, sunlight streaming through the windows, Elena's cheerful babbling announcing her hunger in the new day. They packed up slowly, both reluctant to leave the isolation and return to the complicated reality of their actual lives. The drive back to the city felt longer than the drive out. Adrian watched Clara in the rearview mirror, saw her staring out the window with Elena asleep against her chest. The weight of everything they'd been through showed in the lines around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. We're going to be okay, he said quietly. She met his eyes in the mirror. Promise? Promise. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we're going to build the life we want. But the council meeting that afternoon was anticlimactic compared to the drama of the previous weeks. Volkov's legitimate operations were divided among the families who'd lost property in his attacks, reparations paid in business assets rather than cash. The vote was unanimous, efficient, almost boring in its lack of conflict. Afterward, Diane pulled Adrian aside. It's working. People are starting to believe the system can actually function. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm relieved. She glanced around the emptying room. There's talk about making the mediator position permanent. Not you specifically, but having someone in that role ongoing instead of just for transition. That's good. That's the structure becoming self-sustaining. It is. But Adrian, Diane's expression turned serious. You need to start training your replacement soon. Because if you try to stay past the agreed year, people are going to see it as a power grab. The system only works if you actually step back when you said you would. I know, I'm already working on it. Good. Because I'd hate to see everything we built fall apart because you couldn't let go. The words stung, but Adrian recognized the truth in them. He'd created this structure, but he couldn't be the one to run it forever. The whole point was to build something that didn't require his constant presence, his constant enforcement, his constant willingness to be the villain. He drove home thinking about succession, about training, about what it would mean to truly walk away from power after spending 15 years building it. The house came into view, secure and peaceful, Marcus's team visible at their posts. Clara met him at the door, Elena in her arms. How did it go? Good, quiet, boring. He kissed them both. Exactly what we need. That evening, Adrian sat in his office while Clara put Elena to bed and started making a list of potential mediator candidates. People with the right combination of strategic thinking and diplomatic skills. People who understood the old world but believed in the new system. People who could enforce consequences without enjoying the power. It was a short list, but it was a start. 11 more months. 11 more months of enforcement and mediation and proving the structure could work. Then he'd hand it over to someone else and walk away for real this time. Walk away to the civilian life he'd promised Clara, to the ordinary existence Elena deserved. The path wasn't clear yet. The future wasn't certain, but for the first time since signing those divorce papers 8 months ago, Adrian Romano could see a version of tomorrow that included peace instead of war, partnership instead of isolation, family instead of empire. And that more than any power he'd ever held felt like victory. 3 weeks after Volkov's arrest, Clara woke to the sound of Elena crying and sunlight streaming through windows that no longer felt like observation points for potential threats. The security team was still there, still vigilant, but something had shifted. The house felt less like a fortress and more like a home. She found Adrian in the nursery, already changed and holding Elena against his shoulder, swaying gently while humming something tuneless. He'd gotten better at this, the early morning comfort, the instinctive response to their daughter's needs. He looked up when Clara appeared in the doorway, smiled with the kind of unguarded warmth he rarely showed anyone else. "She's teething," he said quietly. "I can feel the bumps on her gums." Dr. Mitchell said it would start soon. Clara moved to them, touched Elena's flushed cheek. "Poor baby." I gave her the teething ring from the freezer. It helped a little. Adrian kissed Elena's head, then handed her to Clara. "I have to leave in an hour. Final candidate interview for the mediator position." "The last one?" Clara settled into the rocking chair, Elena already rooting for breakfast. "Yeah. Thomas Brennan. Former federal prosecutor who specialized in organized crime cases. Left the DA's office 2 years ago to start consulting. He understands both worlds, has no family ties to complicate loyalty, and according to everyone who's worked with him, he's brilliant at negotiation." Clara looked up at him, saw the tension hiding beneath the casual update. "You're nervous about handing this over." "I'm terrified about handing this over." Adrian leaned against the window frame, backlit by morning sun. "What if I choose wrong? What if the person I select can't handle the pressure, or gets corrupted by the power, or decides the old ways were better after all? Then the council removes them and chooses someone else. That's how the system works, right? Checks and balances. No single person with unchecked authority. In theory." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "But theory and practice are different things. And if this fails, if the structure collapses after I step back, then you'll have tried something different. You'll have proved it's possible even if it isn't permanent." Clara shifted Elena to her shoulder, began the gentle patting rhythm. "But Adrian, you can't control everything forever. At some point you have to trust that what you built is strong enough to survive without you." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the manicured grounds and the distant city. "I know. Doesn't make it easier." "Nothing about this has been easy. Why should letting go be any different?" Adrian laughed, the sound tired but genuine. "Fair point." He checked his watch. "I need to get ready. The interview's at 9. Clara watched him leave, then looked down at Elena, who'd fallen back asleep against her chest. "Your daddy's trying to save the world by giving up power. Most people try to save it by taking more. We got lucky with him, didn't we?" Elena made a small sound that could have been agreement or gas. Clara chose to believe it was agreement. The interview with Thomas Brennan took place in a conference room that had been swept for surveillance devices 3 times. The man who arrived was in his early 40s, salt and pepper hair cut short, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He wore a suit that suggested success, but not ostentation, and he moved with the confidence of someone who'd faced down dangerous people and survived. Adrian spent the first 30 minutes probing Brennan's background, his motivations, his understanding of the council structure. The man's answers were thoughtful and direct. No diplomatic hedging or political maneuvering. "I'm not interested in power for its own sake," Brennan said when Adrian asked about his intentions. "I spent 10 years prosecuting people who used power to hurt others. The work was important, but ultimately Sisyphean. Put one person away, 3 more take their place. Your council structure offers something different, a way to create accountability from the inside rather than imposing it from the outside. And you think that can work?" "I think it's already working. Dmitry Petrov and Anton Volkov are both in federal custody because their own organization turned on them for breaking agreed-upon rules. That's unprecedented. Usually, we have to build cases from the outside while everyone inside circles the wagons." Adrian pulled up the council's operational framework on his laptop, turned it so Brennan could see. "The mediator's role is to interpret disputes, recommend consequences, and maintain the balance between families. No operational authority. No ability to make unilateral decisions, just arbitration and advocacy, which requires someone the families trust to be fair." Brennan studied the framework carefully. "Someone without personal stakes in the outcomes." "Exactly. Which is why I can't keep doing it. I have too much history, too many relationships, too many people who see me as either an ally or a threat." Adrian closed the laptop. "You're a neutral party, former law enforcement, which gives you credibility on consequences. no family connections, which removes bias, and your record suggests you understand how to navigate complex power dynamics. You're offering me the position. I'm offering you the opportunity to prove you're the right choice. 3 months working alongside me, learning the families, understanding the conflicts, building relationships. Then, if the council approves and you still want it, the position is yours. Adrian met Brennan's eyes directly. This isn't ceremonial. The threats are real. The stakes are life and death, and you'll be making decisions that could save or destroy people depending on how well you judge situations. Brennan was quiet for a moment, considering. What happens to you after the transition? I become a private citizen, full civilian life. The council has my contact information for emergencies, but otherwise I'm out completely. Adrian felt the weight of that statement, the finality. My wife and daughter deserve a life where their safety isn't constantly threatened by my professional obligations. This is how I give them that. Most people in your position would find a way to maintain control while appearing to step back. Most people in my position don't have a 3-week-old daughter who was born while armed mercenaries were trying to break down the door. Adrian's voice went hard. I'm not interested in maintaining control. I'm interested in building something sustainable and then getting the hell out before it costs me everything that matters. Brennan nodded slowly. When would you want me to start? Tomorrow, if you're willing. I'm willing. They shook hands, the gesture formal but significant. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest, relief and terror mixing in equal measure. This was the beginning of the end, the start of the transition that would either prove his system could work or reveal it as an optimistic fantasy. He spent the rest of the day bringing Brennan up to speed, introducing him to Marcus's security team, providing access to the encrypted communication systems. Brennan absorbed information quickly, asked smart questions, showed no signs of being overwhelmed by the complexity. You're good at this, Adrian said as they were wrapping up. The analysis, the strategic thinking, the ability to see multiple angles simultaneously. I had good teachers. Prosecutors learn to think like criminals to build effective cases. You learn to anticipate, to understand motivations, to see the logic in seemingly chaotic actions. Brennan gathered his notes. Your council structure makes sense because it aligns incentives correctly. Following the rules costs less than breaking them. That's sustainable in a way that pure fear-based control never is. Adrian walked him to his car, making sure security logged the departure properly. When he returned to the house, Clara was waiting in the living room with Elena. How did it go? She asked. Good, really good, actually. He starts tomorrow. Adrian dropped onto the couch beside her, suddenly exhausted. 3 months of training and then I'm out. How do you feel about that? Like I'm jumping off a cliff and hoping the parachute opens. He pulled Clara against his side, careful not to jostle Elena, but also relieved, like maybe this might actually work. Elena chose that moment to spit up on Clara's shoulder, the timing so perfect they both started laughing. Ordinary parenting chaos interrupting the life and death stakes. Adrian grabbed a burp cloth, helped Clara clean up, feeling the normalcy of it settle over him like armor. She has impeccable timing, Clara said, wiping Elena's chin. She has your sense of dramatic timing. Adrian took Elena, held her against his chest. And hopefully my strategic thinking. Combined, she'll be unstoppable. That's a terrifying thought. The next 3 months blurred into a routine of careful transition. Brennan shadowed Adrian through council meetings, mediation sessions, conflict resolutions. He met with each family head individually, building relationships, establishing credibility. The man was a natural diplomat, able to listen without judgment while maintaining clear boundaries. Adrian watched him work with a mixture of pride and anxiety. This was what he'd hoped for, someone capable of taking over without requiring his constant involvement. But letting go meant accepting that he couldn't control outcomes anymore. Couldn't guarantee that every decision would align with his vision. You're hovering, Clara said one evening as Adrian paced the living room while Brennan handled a minor territorial dispute over phone. He can manage a simple mediation without your supervision. I know that intellectually. Adrian stopped at the window, watched the security patrol make its rounds. But what if what? What if he makes a different choice than you would? What if his solution doesn't match your preferred approach? Clara set down the baby monitor, crossed to him. Adrian, the whole point of this system is that no single person's preferences dominate. Brennan's going to do things differently than you. That's good. That's healthy. What if differently means worse? Then the council corrects it. That's what the structure is for. She took his hands, grounded him with touch. You're going to drive yourself crazy if you keep second-guessing every decision. At some point, you have to trust the system you built. He knew she was right, knew that his need to control outcomes was the exact thing that made him unsuitable for permanent mediation. But knowing and accepting were different things. Elena started crying upstairs, her distinctive hungry wail cutting through the conversation. Clara glanced at the monitor. Your turn? I fed her last time. Adrian headed upstairs, grateful for the distraction. Elena was standing in her crib. When had she learned to pull herself up, her face red with indignation? He picked her up, changed her efficiently, then settled into the rocking chair with a bottle. She drank with single-minded determination, her small hands gripping his finger. 4 months old now, becoming more of a person every day. She smiled when he talked to her, laughed at his terrible faces, tracked him with her eyes whenever he entered a room. Your mom thinks I'm being controlling, he told her quietly. She's probably right. I'm not good at trusting other people to do important things. Always feels safer to handle it myself. Elena paused drinking, looked up at him with dark eyes that were becoming more like Clara's every day. But here's the thing. If I don't let go, if I keep holding on to control, then all of this was for nothing. The council, the new rules, the whole structure, it only matters if it can survive without me. Otherwise, it's just another power play dressed up in better language. Elena went back to her bottle, unimpressed by his crisis of faith. You're going to grow up in a different world than I did, Adrian continued. One where family doesn't mean you're automatically involved in questionable business. Where your safety doesn't depend on your father's ability to instill fear. Where being a Romano means something other than violence and power. He pulled the empty bottle away, lifted her to his shoulder for burping. That's the promise I made to your mother. That's the promise I'm making to you. Whatever it takes. However hard it is. Elena burped impressively, then made happy sounds against his shoulder. Adrian held her close, breathing in the baby shampoo scent of her, feeling the absolute certainty that every difficult decision had been worth it for this. The formal transition happened on a gray morning in late autumn, exactly 1 year after the council structure had been established. Every family head gathered in the same renovated bank vault where they'd voted to enforce consequences against Dmitry Petrov. But the atmosphere was different now, less tension, more cautious optimism. Adrian stood at the head of the table one final time. A year ago, I proposed a new way of operating, a structure built on accountability instead of fear, on collective decision-making instead of individual authority, on consequences that applied equally regardless of power or position. You voted to try it, and against all odds, it worked. He pulled up statistics on the room's projection screen. Territorial disputes down 63% compared to the previous year. Civilian casualties down by 90%. Federal prosecutions of family operations down 40% because we're self-policing before external forces have to intervene. The system works. Diane Castellano spoke first. Because you made it work. You enforced consequences when it would have been easier to look the other way. You turned over people who'd been allies because they violated the rules. You prioritized the structure over personal relationships, which is exactly why I can't continue as mediator. Adrian's voice was steady. The position requires neutrality I no longer have. Too many of you see me as either the person who protected you or the person who destroyed your enemies. That's not neutral. That's not sustainable. He gestured to Brennan, who stood at the side of the room. Thomas Brennan has spent 3 months learning this system, building relationships with your families, understanding the nuances of the conflicts we manage. He's former federal law enforcement, which gives him credibility on consequences without the baggage of family loyalty. And most importantly, he believes in the structure we built. Brennan stepped forward, professional and confident. I'm not Adrian Romano. I don't have his history or his relationships or his reputation. What I have is a commitment to making this system work, to arbitrating disputes fairly, to recommending consequences consistently, to maintaining the balance that makes collective governance possible. The room was quiet as families considered. Adrian had spent the last month individually lobbying for Brennan's approval, using every relationship he'd built to advocate for the transition. But the final decision belonged to the council. Michael Chen raised his hand. I vote to confirm Thomas Brennan as mediator. One by one, the others followed. Some quickly, some after visible deliberation. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Brennan was officially the council's new mediator. Adrian felt the weight lift from his shoulders so suddenly he almost staggered. It was done. The transition was complete. He was officially out. "Thank you," he said simply, "for trusting the process, for committing to something different, for proving that change is possible even in our world." Diane approached as people were filing out. "You did something remarkable here. You know that, right?" "We did something remarkable. I just started it." Adrian shook her hand, the gesture formal but warm. "Take care of him. Help him succeed. The system only works if everyone's invested in its success." "We will, because we want it to work." She paused at the door. "What will you do now? In civilian life?" "Honestly, I have no idea, but I'm looking forward to finding out." Clara was waiting when he got home, Elena playing on a blanket on the living room floor. She looked up when Adrian entered, her expression hopeful and nervous. "It's done," he said. "Brennan's confirmed. I'm officially retired." Clara stood, crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him tight. "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Relieved. Free." He held her close, breathing in the familiar comfort. "Like I just stepped off a cliff and discovered I can fly. Or maybe you just discovered the cliff wasn't as high as you thought." Clara pulled back, looked at him with eyes that knew him too well. "What now?" "Now we figure out what normal looks like. Real normal. Not crisis management normal or temporary peace normal. Actual boring civilian normal." Elena made a demanding sound from her blanket, reaching up with small hands. Adrian picked her up, settled her on his hip. She grabbed his collar, babbling in the mostly nonsense way of 4-month-olds. "Hear that?" he said to Clara. "She's already giving me advice on retirement planning. She's probably telling you to sleep more. She's very wise that way." The next few weeks were a careful experiment in ordinary life. Adrian went through his phone and deleted every contact that connected to the old world. Every number, every encrypted app, every connection to the system he'd helped build. Marcus stayed on as head of personal security, but the rest of the tactical team transitioned to council oversight. The house became quieter. Less traffic from business meetings and strategy sessions, more space for things like family dinners and Elena's increasingly animated interactions with the world. Adrian discovered he enjoyed cooking, the precise measurements and timing scratching the same itch as strategic planning, but with less lethal stakes. Clara watched the transformation with cautious optimism. "You seem different. Lighter, somehow." "I feel different. Like I've been carrying weight for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight." Adrian was chopping vegetables for dinner, Elena and her bouncer on the counter where she could watch. "The first week I kept waiting for an emergency call, some crisis that would pull me back in. But it never came. Brennan's handling everything. How does that make you feel?" "Honestly, a little insulted that the system doesn't need me anymore." He laughed at his own ego. "But mostly relieved. Watching him succeed proves the structure works, that it wasn't dependent on me personally." Clara moved behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, rested her head against his back. "I'm proud of you. For building something good and then having the courage to walk away from it. I'm proud of us. For surviving the transition. For making it through the chaos without destroying each other." He turned in her arms, pulled her close. "For choosing to try again instead of accepting that distance was safer." Elena chose that moment to knock her bouncer toy onto the floor, then immediately started crying at its loss. They both laughed, the domestic interruption perfectly timed. "That's our cue," Clara said, retrieving the toy. Crisis management of the infant variety. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Elena demanding attention, Clara recounting funny moments from her day, Adrian burning the rice because he got distracted making silly faces at their daughter. It was messy and imperfect, and absolutely nothing like the controlled precision of his previous life. It was perfect. That night, after Elena was asleep and the kitchen was clean, Adrian found Clara in their bedroom looking at her laptop. "What are you doing?" "Looking at houses." She turned the screen so he could see. "Smaller cities, good school districts, places where nobody knows who we are." Adrian sat beside her, scrolled through the listings. Suburban homes with yards and good lighting, normal houses for normal families. "You're serious about moving?" "I'm serious about starting over, really starting over, not just pretending to be civilians while living in a fortress with armed guards." Clara met his eyes. "Don't you want that? A place where Elena can play outside without security protocols? where we can have neighbors and backyard barbecues and all the boring, ordinary things. I want that more than almost anything. He closed the laptop gently. But Clara, the threats don't completely disappear just because I retired. There are still people who remember what I did, who might hold grudges. I know. Marcus already gave me the speech about maintaining basic security protocols even after relocation. Clara took his hand. But there's a difference between reasonable precaution and living like we're under siege. I want reasonable precaution. I want to raise Elena somewhere she can be a kid instead of a potential target. Then let's do it. Find the right place and we'll move. Adrian squeezed her hand. Fresh start. New town. Different life. Clara's smile was the first genuinely unguarded one he'd seen in months. Yeah? Yeah, we'll keep this house as a backup. Maintain minimal security. But our primary residence can be somewhere normal. Somewhere we can disappear into ordinary life. They started seriously looking the next week. Clara would send him listings during the day, and they'd discuss them over dinner, talking about school districts and commute times, and whether the kitchen was big enough for the cooking Adrian had suddenly developed an interest in. Elena hit 5 months and became increasingly mobile, rolling over with determination and grabbing everything within reach. She laughed more now, deep belly laughs when Adrian made ridiculous sounds or Clara played peekaboo. She was becoming a person with preferences and personality, and watching it happen was the most fascinating thing either of them had ever experienced. She's going to be trouble, Clara said one evening, watching Elena determinedly try to grab her own feet. Look at that focus. That's your strategic planning combined with my stubbornness. We're doomed, Adrian agreed, absolutely doomed. But he was smiling when he said it. Happiness settled deep in his bones. They found the right house in a town 2 hours north, a place called Riverside Mills that had good schools and a low crime rate and absolutely no connection to Adrian's previous life. The house itself was modest by their current standards. 3 bedrooms, a yard with mature trees, a kitchen that needed updating but had good bones. It's perfect, Clara said during their third walkthrough. It's exactly what I pictured. Adrian stood in the empty living room, imagining their furniture here, imagining Elena learning to walk on these floors, imagining ordinary mornings and quiet evenings and all the mundane moments that made up a life. Let's make an offer. The sale went through quickly, cash purchase under Clara's maiden name to avoid any connection to Romano Holdings. They spent 2 weeks moving essentials, setting up security that was thorough but invisible, establishing themselves in the community as a young family, relocating for work. Their new neighbors were friendly but not intrusive. A retired teacher on one side, a young couple with a toddler on the other. People who waved when they saw you but didn't ask probing questions about your background. This is weird, Adrian said their first night in the new house, lying in bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a different neighborhood. Good weird, but weird. You'll get used to it. Clara was curled against his side, one hand resting on his chest. We both will. This is what normal feels like. Elena woke crying at 2 a.m., and Adrian got up to feed her, moving through the new house by memory that wasn't quite established yet. He settled in the nursery's rocking chair, Elena drinking her bottle with drowsy determination. Welcome to your new home, he told her quietly. Your mom and I did some questionable things to make sure you could grow up here safely. But you don't need to worry about that. You just get to be a kid, get to have friends, and go to good schools, and never wonder if your father's work is going to put you in danger. Elena's eyes were already drifting closed, milk-drunk and peaceful. Adrian finished feeding her, changed her diaper, put her back in the crib with the gentleness of practice. Then he stood there watching her sleep, feeling the absolute certainty that every difficult decision had led to this moment. The first few months in Riverside Mills were an adjustment. Adrian had to learn how to fill his days without the structure of council business and strategic planning. He took up running, discovered he enjoyed the meditative quality of it. He read books that had nothing to do with power dynamics or organizational structure. He learned to be present instead of constantly planning 3 moves ahead. Clara went back to school part-time, taking online courses in early childhood education, something she'd always been interested in but never had time for. Elena hit 6 months and started eating solid foods, which turned every meal into an adventure in mess management. They made friends with the couple next door, Mike and Sarah, whose daughter Lily was a year older than Elena. Started having casual dinners together, the kind where kids played on blankets while adults talked about normal things like home repair and local politics. This is nice, Sarah said one evening, watching the girls babble at each other. You guys settling in okay? Better than okay, Clara said, and meant it. This is exactly what we needed. Adrian caught her eye across the room, saw the contentment there, the peace that had been missing for so long. He felt it too. The absence of constant threat assessment, the ability to focus on immediate concerns instead of potential dangers 3 moves out. Marcus called once a month with security updates, brief check-ins to make sure everything was stable. The calls got shorter each time as the months passed without incident. The old world was moving on without Adrian, the council structure functioning exactly as designed. Brennan's doing well, Marcus reported during one call. Settled a major territorial dispute last week without any violence. The families are starting to really trust the system. Good. That's good. Adrian watched Clara and Elena playing in the backyard through the kitchen window. How are things otherwise? Quiet. The structure's holding. A few minor tests here and there, but nothing that requires your involvement. A pause. You're really out, boss. Successfully out. Adrian felt the finality of that settle over him. Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for helping make this possible. Just doing my job. You take care of your family. That's the most important thing now. After the call, Adrian joined Clara and Elena in the yard. Elena was crawling now, moving with determined efficiency toward a butterfly that had landed on the grass. Clara was following at a safe distance, ready to intervene if needed, but letting their daughter explore. Marcus says everything's stable, Adrian said, settling onto the grass beside Clara. The council's functioning well without me. How does that feel? Like proof that I made the right choice. He pulled Clara against him, both of them watching Elena discover the world one grass blade at a time. Like maybe we actually pulled this off. Elena reached the butterfly, which flew away at her approach. She sat back, surprised, then laughed with pure delight at the movement. Clara and Adrian laughed too, the sound mingling in the afternoon air. That evening, after Elena was asleep, they sat on the back porch with glasses of wine and watched the sunset over their small yard. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where the biggest excitement was the annual street fair. I've been thinking, Clara said, about the foundation. Adrian turned to her. What foundation? The one we should start. For families affected by violence, for kids who lost parents to crime, for women trying to escape dangerous situations. Clara's eyes were bright with purpose. We have resources. We have experience. We could actually help people instead of just surviving ourselves. Adrian felt something click into place, purpose that had been missing since he stepped back from the council. You're right. We could. Build something positive instead of just dismantling something negative. They started planning that night, sketching ideas and discussing implementation. A foundation that would provide resources without asking questions. That would help people rebuild without judgment. That would turn their experience with violence and power into something that protected instead of threatened. The Elena May Romano Foundation launched 6 months later, quietly funded and carefully managed. They helped domestic violence survivors relocate safely, provided scholarships for kids whose parents were incarcerated, offered job training and housing assistance for people trying to leave criminal organizations. It was different work than Adrian had done before, slower, more focused on individuals than systems. But watching people rebuild their lives, seeing the direct impact of resources deployed thoughtfully, it satisfied the same drive that had motivated his council work, the desire to create something better than what existed. Elena turned 1 year old on a sunny Saturday in May. They threw a small party in the backyard, just family and their new friends from the neighborhood. Clara's sister came with her kids, Marcus stopped by with a giant stuffed bear, and Mike and Sarah brought Lily over to play. Adrian watched Clara laugh at something Sarah said, watched Elena smash cake into her face with enthusiastic determination, watched the ordinary chaos of a child's birthday party unfold around him. This was what he'd fought for. This exact moment of peace and joy and normalcy. You look happy, Marcus said, appearing at his elbow with a beer. I am happy. Happier than I've been in years. Maybe ever. Adrian accepted the beer, clinked bottles. Thank you for making this possible. For protecting us while we figured out how to protect ourselves. Always. That's what family does. Marcus watched Elena discover the joy of throwing cake. She's going to be something special, that one. She already is. As the sun set on Elena's first birthday, as Clara put their exhausted, cake-covered daughter to bed, As Adrian cleaned up the backyard with the satisfied tiredness of good exhaustion, he felt the absolute certainty that they'd made it, had survived the transition from his old life to this new one, had built something worth keeping. That night, lying in bed with Clara curled against him, Adrian said the thing he'd been feeling for months but hadn't found words for yet. I love this life, this ordinary, boring, peaceful life. I love it more than anything I had before. Even though it means giving up power, control, the ability to influence major decisions, especially because it means giving those things up. Power was exhausting. Control was isolating. He gestured at their bedroom, at the house around them, at the life they'd built. This is real. This matters in ways that Empire never did. Clara lifted her head, kissed him softly. I love you for choosing this, for choosing us. I love you too, for giving me the chance to choose differently. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in either of their memories, the night passed without nightmares or threats or the weight of constant vigilance. Morning came with Elena's cheerful babbling through the monitor, sunlight streaming through curtains they'd chosen together, and the promise of another ordinary day in their extraordinary, ordinary life. Adrian made coffee while Clara got Elena ready for the day. They ate breakfast as a family, discussing nothing more important than whether they should go to the park or the library. Elena voted for the park by throwing her sippy cup enthusiastically toward the door. Park it is, Adrian said, catching the cup before it hit the floor. Democracy in action. They walked the 3 blocks to the neighborhood park, Elena in her stroller until she saw the swings and demanded to be released. Adrian pushed her gently while Clara took pictures, capturing the joy on their daughter's face as she experienced the simple pleasure of movement and height. This was the victory, not the council structure or the successful transition or even the foundation helping people rebuild. The real victory was this moment, this morning, this life where the biggest concern was whether Elena would nap before lunch. Adrian Romano had ruled through fear and strategy and carefully calculated consequences. He'd built an empire, dismantled it, and rebuilt something different in its place. He turned over allies and made enemies and enforced rules that cost him relationships. But in the end, the thing he was proudest of wasn't the system he'd created or the change he'd forced into existence. It was this: a sunny morning in a park with his wife and daughter, completely anonymous and perfectly happy. He'd learned that power wasn't what you could destroy. It was what you protected and kept. And standing there, watching Elena laugh as he pushed her swing higher, Adrian understood that he'd finally found the thing worth protecting with everything he had. Not an empire, not a system, not even a legacy. Just this. Just family. Just love. Just the ordinary miracle of being someone's father, someone's husband, someone who came home every night to people who needed him for reasons that had nothing to do with power or strategy or control. The war had ended not with violence or dominance or even justice. It had ended with a choice to value peace over power, partnership over isolation, and presence over influence. And as Elena demanded, "Higher, Daddy, higher," and Clara laughed at both of them, Adrian Romano felt something he'd never expected to feel. Complete. The phone in his pocket stayed silent. The threats didn't materialize. The old world kept turning without him. And for the first time in his adult life, Adrian was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what mattered most with exactly the people who made it all worthwhile. The victory wasn't in the war he'd won. It was in the peace he'd chosen. And that peace, hard fought and carefully built, was finally, beautifully real.